Seeing at 6 p.m., I'd like to call the February 1st, 2023 regular meeting of the Kansas City Council to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here this evening. I would ask that if you're able, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Winger,
Present.
Vice Mayor Baisden,
Here.
Mayor Gabriel,
Here.
Councilmember Dothett,
Here.
Councilmember Sonart,
Here.
Councilmember Nackstead,
Here.
Councilmember Askin.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next up, we have agenda approval. Councilmember Naxted. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Before we get to the agenda approval, actually, I'd like to call your attention to lay down. You should have in front of you with several requested additions to the packet. Action add item D1, ordinance number 332-2023, public comments requested by the city clerk. Action add item D5, resolution number 2023-05, capital improvement plan corrections memo requested by administration. And action add to item O, informational items, Operation Children First Flyer, requested by Councilmember Winger. Councilmember Naxted.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I move for approval of the agenda with the add items D1, D5, and add item 0. Request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Is there any objection to unanimous consent? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move for approval of the consent agenda and request unanimous consent.
I'll second.
Is there anybody from the body who'd like to amend the consent agenda at this time? Seeing none, I'd ask the clerk to please read the consent agenda into the record.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Approval of the regular meeting minutes of January 18th, 2023, introduced by the city clerk. New business, action approval of bills to be ratified, brought to you by the administration, and introduction of ordinance number 3335, 2023, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund fiscal year 2023 budget for utility costs associated with Alaska Regional Fire Training Center. Public hearing on February 15th, 2023, and that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody from the general public who would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record? Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. That brings us to item B, scheduled public comment. We have several here this evening. First up, we have City of Kenai Marketing presentation by Coy West, CEO and founder of Divining Point. Mr. West, you have the floor.
So I want to thank council for giving me the opportunity to speak with you again. I realize I don't get up here often enough and attend these meetings. I do come to town on city business and actually do some work here, but it doesn't always seem to coincide with when you guys are having your city council meetings. The presentation we put together really sort of reflects on the work that we've done over the last 4 years, but primarily what we've accomplished in this fiscal year. And one of the things I always like to remind before I jump into these presentations is all the photos that you see in the presentation are original photography that we've done and is part of the deliverables that we've handed over to the city for marketing purposes, both internally as well as to the city and beyond. So when we started work about 4 years ago, we were asked to take a look at the city of Kenai and sort of envision what its future could be. And specifically, we were looking at how we could create an identity that both builds pride within the community, something that really represents the city, as well as can take a message to the public, both outside the city here in Alaska and beyond, to really showcase what's special about the city of Kenai. And so that's how, let's see if this thing works here. My clicker?
Is it not going?
No, I may have touched something. There we go. Next slide. So there we go. So this is how the Best Place to Alaska was born. This is something we worked on with the city administration. We took a deep dive into the values here of the city and specifically looking at the best place to raise a family, the best place to start a business, and the best place to pursue the Alaskan lifestyle. And we've taken that message both internally, you see that the transition has occurred here citywide, as well as we've taken that message beyond. And it's something that we embrace, and it's something that sort of is the foundation for everything that we do from a marketing perspective. So looking back on this fiscal year, I like to start with what our marketing scope was. So essentially, we are promoting business within Kenai. We're also promoting Kenai for relocation and tourism, because we want to try and capture as many people to come to the city to either become a part of the community or to enjoy their stay while they're here for travel or tourism. And we're heavily invested and involved in promoting the events that happen here in the city of Kenai, as well as photography and video. And then we leverage our creative services for all of the above. All right, next slide. Thank you. So July 1st is the start of the fiscal year, and that's usually when we are heads down working on promoting the Kenai Silver Salmon Derby. So when we picked this event up back 4 years ago, we actually started the 3rd annual Kenai Silver Salmon Derby. It was a pretty small event in terms of total sponsorships. It was about 2,500. And what we had to do is we had to take a look at this particular event and figure out how we could frame it in a way that would really attract more people to participate. Some of the objections and I think the curiosity about the event was because it had unique rules, it was really difficult for people to understand how they could participate. And it wasn't necessarily taken as seriously as, say, some of the events that you see, some of the derbies that happen in places like Homer and other cities. And so we really leaned into the world's most responsible fishing tournament because of the unique rules and because of the way that it's fashioned to try and minimize some of the challenges that occur to the silver salmon population. We have taken that message and sort of framed everything that we do around it. Now you can see with this year, we were able to attract quite a bit of sponsors, and with the help of administration, we had Marathon Oil as well as Hillcorp. We did have some returning sponsors as well, including Tote Maritime, Buckets, IGA, and we were able to attract a few new sponsors. And the great thing that we determined through this process this year is we now have some commitments already for the future, for the next Silver Salmon Derby and beyond. So the total sponsorships that were generated this year was 14,250. Total ticket sales was 3,850, and the total prizes awarded was $6,900. In terms of the work that we did to promote the event, next slide please, is so we sent out a press release. We also leveraged some media relationships that we have in order to try and get coverage for the event. So our total potential PR audience through that effort was 1.89 million. We also ran advertising here on the Kenai Peninsula as well as in the Anchorage area to see if we could try and attract some participation. And we were able to reach 28,185 people through Facebook and Instagram. Now with the help of Chamber and the contract that they have with KSRM, we were able to run radio ads. And then we were also in 3 print publications, including making the cover of both Fish Alaska and Alaska Sporting Journal. I personally wrote the story for Fish Alaska. It was about a 2,000 word showcase on the event. And one of the things that we're discovering, as I mentioned, is that people are really starting to embrace this messaging about the world's most responsible fishing tournament. It's a very unique way to frame a fishing derby, and I think it really falls in line with a lot of people's values in terms of being able to preserve wildlife there on the Kenai River as well as support sporting events. We even made Yahoo News, which we're pretty proud of in terms of our online exposure. And the other thing that happened for the first time this year, which hadn't happened before, is we've now made it to the featured snippets on Google results. So when you go to search for World's Most Responsible Fishing Tournament, it actually recommends the proper way to say it, as well as provide a featured snippet, which gives you a synopsis of what the event is. So overall, we feel like this event continues to grow. We're very excited about the future. We're very excited to be able to attract some larger sponsors, and our goal is to continue to increase the sponsorship and be able to increase participation in the event. Also, some of the things that we saw in terms of online chatter and things that we were hearing from the community is that this is now an annual event that people put on their calendar and they look forward to. And it seems to be something that a lot of families are really participating in. So as part of our scope also, we do quite a bit of videography and photography here. This year was the first time we were ever able to actually capture the Kenai Silver Salmon Derby on film. We had 2 false starts before. One year the weather was not cooperating, and the other year the fish weren't biting when we went out to do our work. So I'm happy to say that we actually have video and photography from the event, and we plan on using that as we continue to promote this fishing derby to the public, both in print and in video and online as well. Also, for the first time, we were able to film Christmas Comes to Kenai, which we felt was a really important thing that the public needed to know about, particularly as they're considering looking at making a move to Kenai. It's a very family-friendly event. It is very unique to Kenai, and we really felt like by capturing that both in a short-form video and a long-form video that we could tell that story. So in total, we have 8 new videos this year. We did get some assistance with local vendors in order to help us do some coordinating and some of the filming on that. And so we continue to leverage some local resources to help us with our scope. I invite everybody to go to the I Love Kenai YouTube page, and while you're there, please hit subscribe. You can see all the videos that we've created so far for the city of Kenai. It's about 21 videos. We have one more that we're looking to produce this year, if the weather will cooperate, and then we already have some ideas for what we want to do in the future, which I can get into here. So these are just a couple of photos from the Kenai Silver Salmon Derby. Again, we were never able to do this before, and so we're pretty excited to be able to finally capture that and be able to showcase that. We also have some other photography from sporting events, as well as some of the recreational activities that you have here in Kenai. I think this is a really beautiful photo of the golf course. So this is probably the most exciting part of the presentation, and what I think is really the most exciting part of the work that we've been doing. So the I Love Kenai website originally was a destination where we were sending people to get a snapshot of what Kenai was about and then be able to jump off to go to the Chamber's website or the city's website to learn more about resources. And we filled the website with beautiful photos, beautiful video, and just some snippets of information to basically get people started in their discovery process. Over time, we've been building more and more content onto the website so that it is becoming sort of the sole resource with a good user experience for people to learn about living, working, playing, and discovering Kenai. We've been building out this content based on a strategy that we have. So we have tools that allow us to do some pretty significant data analysis. And what we have learned as we've gone through our process is what are the potential objections that people have when they are considering moving from the lower 48 to Alaska? What are the top things that people are searching for about Alaska? What are the top things that people are searching for when they're discovering Kenai? And initially, 4 years ago, the big challenge that we had was how do we distinguish Kenai from the Kenai Peninsula Borough, the Kenai River, the Kenai Fjords? When you would do searches for Kenai online, you would get those results. And over time now, Kenai, the city of Kenai, is actually growing to the top of the searches for some of these searches that people are using. Oh, okay. I have to do that. No problem. So what we've looked at is essentially what are the keywords that we can target, and then how can we create content to satisfy that curiosity online? How can we introduce them to Kenai, whether it's for travel or for relocation, so that they can learn about it and start to put this into their process? And I'm happy to say the traffic from the lower 48 has actually grown over time. Next slide, please. So one of the top searches over time has been places to eat in Kenai. And we wanted to be able to present, I knew that would happen. Okay, so we wanted to be able to present a resource for people so that they could actually get a local's perspective on all the restaurants that are here in Kenai. So we do have links that actually go to the business websites and to their Facebook pages. We do have links to their phone numbers in case somebody's on mobile and wants to call. There's also a brief snippet underneath every restaurant giving the insider's perspective on the restaurant and even a tip on what to order from the menu. The other thing that we saw is in terms of the best place to raise a family, a lot of people have questions when they're deciding to move to Alaska. The first one always comes up is what's winter like in Alaska? And unbeknownst to a lot of people, it's actually pretty mild compared to places like Wisconsin. And even my home right now, my wife and family are dealing with a power outage because we've had colder temperatures this week than you guys have had here. So I think that there's been some storytelling that's needed in order to get over that objection potentially when people are looking at moving to Alaska. The other one is, where's the best place to raise my kids? In the past, when you would search for those things, you wouldn't find a whole lot of information that would lead people back to Kenai. So using that data and creating a variety of pieces of content on the website, we've actually been able to uncover that problem or that question for people. So the website itself ranks for about 100 keywords total, but I just put together the top 10 keywords that the website ranks for. And as you can see, some of these are associated with the curiosity and the questions that I mentioned before. So living in Kenai, Alaska, Kenai Peninsula winter, North Beach, Kenai, best places to live in Alaska for families, Kenai South Beach, restaurants in Kenai, Alaska, and I have 3 asterisks next to that because it's a variety of search terms like restaurants in Kenai, places to dine in Kenai, etc. Visit Kenai, the Kenai 4th of July Parade, downtown Kenai, Alaska, and the Captain Cook State Recreation Area. We also took a look at, of the search terms and search queries that people are using to get to the website, what are the top ones that are driving them there? And so currently Kenai, Alaska, living in Kenai, Alaska, Kenai weather, again, best places to live in Alaska for families. Is Alaska a good place to raise a family? Kenai, so we've finally been able to distinguish the city from the other challenges that we had. Weather in Kenai, Alaska, best place to raise a family in Alaska, things to do in Kenai, Alaska during the winter, and then where is Kenai, Alaska? And so what's exciting for us is the work that we've done this year has actually started to turn out some results. Now when you put in some of these search terms, we're on the first page of results where we didn't used to be. So places to eat in Kenai, we're number 4. Best place to raise a family in Alaska, we're number 4. Best place to live in Alaska for families, we're also number 4. And the other keywords that we have through the work that we're doing and continuing to do, we'll continue to find ourselves on the first page of these search engines. Ultimately, the way that people explore where they want to travel and where they want to live right now starts with searches online. And we want to be sure that when they're doing that, that Kenai is front and center so they can discover all the things that the city has to offer. This has also led us to a recent project that we just completed in November. We know that a lot of people around the world, particularly in the lower 48, want to come fishing on the Kenai River. There was no real comprehensive fishing guide for fishing on the Kenai River, so we created one. It's on the website now. It gives you pretty much everything you need to know. Species of fish, the seasons, boating regulations, where all the good put-in points are. It even defines the upper, lower, middle Kenai River and what makes those unique. And so our hope is that over time, as people are starting to explore fishing on the Kenai River in the Kenai Peninsula, that this will be where they'll go first, and then they can discover all the other great things that Kenai has to offer. This represents a map of the lower 48 where the traffic is coming from to the website. So what you'll notice is we've been able to attract people from all across the United States to that website now. And that traffic continues to grow through the efforts that we're doing on the website as well as the advertising that we're doing as well. Our hope is that the states that are dark right now represent the greatest amount of traffic. We'd like to see that grow throughout the Midwest, the Northeast as well. But over time, we're really pleased with the results of this website and how it's representing the community. So a little bit about our advertising campaign. We have been doing the campaigns. Again, it is a data-driven strategy. Specifically for the advertising that we've been doing, we've been targeting families for a couple of different reasons. First off, for relocation. We know that there are people who are looking at Alaska and considering it as a place to live. We're also targeting them for when they are making their decisions to travel to Alaska and where they want to go. We're using a series of video and image ads, and the whole purpose, once again, is to raise awareness of the city of Kenai. These are the platforms that we've been using, so Facebook for images and video, Instagram for images and video, and then YouTube for video. The way that we've been doing our targeting is we've gone to Realtor.com and pulled data on the top real estate queries in the United States. What are the top counties where people are actively searching for real estate right now on the Kenai Peninsula? And so you have places like Seattle, places like Los Angeles, Atlanta, Loudoun County close to DC, Maricopa County in Arizona. You can kind of come to your own conclusions why people in those communities might be looking at Alaska as a place to raise their families and to get away from where they're at now. We also always target Anchorage in the Mat-Su Valley because we do want to attract people from those communities to relocate here. This is just a sample of the ads that we're using. Again, these are all original photos. Trying to highlight really the great lifestyle that you can have here in the city of Kenai, some of the great recreational things that you can do. And then this is just some screenshots from some of the video ads that we're running as well. We tried to make sure to represent the city during both the winter as well as during the summer and the spring. Again, we want to try and overcome this objection that everything stops during the wintertime, which is entirely untrue. So our performance, our total reach from our campaigns is just over 2 million people. The audience skews about 8% more female. We kind of figured that would be the case because women tend to be the first and last line of decision-making when it comes to travel as well as relocation, and so we're pretty pleased with that. We did target people between the ages of 35 and 54. However, we were still able to reach 18 to 34, which we consider to be like able-bodied workers or people with young kids, as well as 55 to 64, which would be people who might be planning for retirement or planning for like their bucket list vacation. So moving forward, we're working with city administration to kind of set what our goals are for the next year. Some of the things that we're identifying is, of course, it's time to produce more video and more photos. I do feel like as we move forward and we continue to build out this website and we continue to work with, say, magazines and some other publications to give exposure to the city, there's just a big need for content. I would like to actually see more long-form video, particularly with a greater focus on local businesses. It's one of the things I think that could really contribute to both the business community here to give them some more exposure, as well as start to answer questions for people who might be considering coming to Kenai. What kind of restaurants are there? What kind of businesses are there? You know, what kind of jobs can be had within the city of Kenai? And so our hope over this next year is to be able to focus more on that, particularly with some partnerships here within the community. Of course, with the city, we'd like to try and engage with the chamber to help us in that regard. Certainly, I feel like the communication with the chamber has been pretty strong in the past, and I'd like to try and build that more into the future. Have tried to set up a meeting with some of the board members so we can figure out how we can make the website work better for them. And then, you know, just continue to build resources from a content perspective for the I Love Kenai website. We've also already started working on this year's Kenai Silver Salmon Derby. So we have the new poster available, and for the first time ever, we're actually able to advertise the award money. We feel pretty confident that by advertising that, we're going to have greater participation in terms of ticket holders. As I mentioned, we do have some sponsors who've already committed to this year. And then, of course, we want to continue to just expand the awareness about this event nationwide if possible. The website is actually built and up, and you can process sponsorships through the website now. In the past, we tend to get pretty delayed with that, and it would happen sometime right around summer. This year, we got right in front of it, tried to get started early. We've already started our outreach with last year's sponsors, and so we're pretty excited about being able to promote the event this year. So as I think about what the future looks like in terms of marketing for the city, we're going to work with the city administration, hope to work with the chamber more. We want to be able to give people a bigger snapshot of what life is like in Kenai, not just during winter and summer, but also spring and fall, and be able to try and focus more on local businesses. You know, we want people who come to Alaska, whether it's for travel or relocation, to know there's coffee shops, there's restaurants, there's nightlife, there's all kinds of recreational activities that can be had here if you decide to bring your family. We feel like there's a lot of really unique qualities about Kenai that makes it very, very attractive to people in the lower 48. I really feel, based on the research that we've done, that people are looking for a community like this. We just have to be able to present ourselves to them and capture their imagination so that they actually come to visit. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity. I apologize once again, I always run over time. But I am available for any kinds of questions that you might have.
Yeah, it's a lot of information there. Thank you, Mr. West. Any, Councilman Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. West, for coming and giving that presentation. I do have a few questions for you. One, you said that we're looking for relocation and we're targeting the Matsu and the Anchorage area. Can you explain to me why we're not targeting Fairbanks?
So we were targeting Fairbanks for a while in previous years, and when we looked at the data in terms of the performance, we didn't feel like we were seeing a whole lot of traction from Fairbanks where we were with Matsu Valley and Anchorage. And so working with the budget that we had for advertising, we wanted to be pretty good stewards of that budget and not throw money where we didn't think we could actually get people to respond.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have is, a lot of your focus is this is the community to raise your families and relocate. One thing I didn't see anything is about education. So as a parent, the first question they're gonna ask is not where they get to eat, but what is the education like for their kids? Aurora Borealis is a great example. They're here in Kenai and they rated in the top 35 in the nation, let alone like the top 10 in our state or top 5 in our state. So it seems like a big shortcoming to not have anything that speaks to the education in our city on that website, because that's really what parents are going to be looking for. And then it doesn't highlight homeschooling aspect on there as well. So I think that we really need to put some information on our education system.
So the website does have information about schools, and we do have a link to the Kenai Peninsula Borough School District. We would like to actually expand on that in terms of developing some additional content. But the website does have information about schools right now. It's on the Live page on the website if you want to take a look at that. I do think in terms of creating some long-form content in the form of videos, I think it would be amazing actually to do some videos of the schools and maybe to get the opportunity for people to experience that.
Thank you. And then just a couple more real quick. Print publication. I've talked to you about this in the past. If we don't have print publication and we're doing digital, what are we going to do to get out into the high tourist areas? Currently, I can go into the Anchorage airport, any one of you guys can, and there's not even a Welcome to Kenai booklet. There's not a pamphlet for the city of Kenai, and then there's no digital advertisement, even in our Anchorage airport. So I feel like we're already missing the ball right there on that. But how else are we going to get out? What's your plans on getting out into Tok for the people that are crossing the border to explore our state? What are you going to do to get information out in Denali? I go to Denali, I go to Chena, I go to Tok, I go to McCarthy with my kids, and I can tell you not a single one of these high tourist areas have a single bleep of the city of Kenai. So what can we do for the people that are traveling the state and are enjoying it, maybe looking at relocating? What are we going to do to get out in those areas?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. So this last year, we were actually in Fish Alaska magazine in terms of our print. This year, we plan on advertising in the visitor guide again. There was a decision made last year not to do that. We are looking at potentially other print opportunities. In fact, I have a meeting with the city tomorrow to explore what's remaining in our scope for this year and see how we can dedicate that to print. I do think that there is a need to explore traditional as well as digital. I think one of the challenges comes in terms of budgeting. So the budget for print as well as TV can be fairly expensive. And so when we're looking at the strategy to try and reach as many people as possible, we're looking what gives us the biggest bang for the buck. And then we also have to say, well, what are our objectives? What are our objectives, and then what gives us the biggest bang for the buck? I think that there's definitely a place for print. I was a print advertising salesperson for a long time early in my career. We just have to be very, very strategic with the budget and make sure that we're choosing the right spots. I do think being in the visitor guide is a good idea. I think the chamber is distributing quite a few of those. And I'm pretty sure that happens statewide. And then in terms of trying to get into some of the sporting magazines, I think that that's also a good investment because we know that quite a few people come here to come to the Kenai Peninsula to fish. There's plenty of opportunities for us to explore more, and I would love to do that.
Thank you. And then my final one is you spoke about highlighting the Christmas Comes to Kenai. I agree completely with that. I think if anybody went and watched the fireworks and did the Christmas Comes to Kenai last year, I mean, it brings thousands of people into the city of Kenai, and it truly seems like a missed opportunity for businesses, for the city to promote it further. I feel like it's definitely an area that as a city we're bringing a lot of people in for an event. And how do we capitalize off that better? So I'll be interested to see what you guys come up with in support of the Christmas Comes to Kenai, because I do feel like it's a missed avenue as a city and for our businesses.
I was delighted we got a chance to video it, frankly. I mean, you know, look, I'm from Austin, and I was kind of jealous that I wasn't here to be a part of that. It's the kind of thing I wish we had in our community. It's a very unique event. The video that we captured is beautiful. You know, I was very specific in terms of what I wanted captured, and Josiah Martin from Martin Media did a beautiful job of it. You can go to the YouTube page now and see the short version of the video. You can see the 30-second version of it. Our goal would be that in terms of content on the website, we already have a blog about it right now that we want to go back and update once we get the dates and the information for this year, and then be able to showcase that potentially on the homepage of the website. And if there's anything else that we can do to assist, to promote that, I would love to do it. I think it's a great event.
Thank you.
Further questions of Mr. West? Councilmember Dothan.
Well, one thing I just wanted to address, Councilman Winger's notice on the lack of Kenai advertising and pamphlets and visitor guides in the Anchorage Airport. And that was partially due to the chamber the last couple of years has not had those, they didn't allow for the budget in those ads to be published in that area. They weren't supplied to that area. That has changed this year. They've upped, nearly doubling the amount of ads, amount of visitor guides they're going to order, and they are going to have those back in the Anchorage Airport, paying a distribution individual to all the normal places, you know, major hotels and restaurants, and all those will be back in that. So it should greatly increase the visibility for those, the print there. I'm not sure about Toke, but I know it goes to many other places. There's a distribution company out of Anchorage that distributes them for all the other cities, and we'll be using those. But back to the iHeart Kenai, I guess a couple things. One, I would love to see, you know, I know you mentioned local businesses and producing it, but just scrolling through the pages and seeing the actual iHeart Kenai website, I don't see a lot of emphasis on local businesses. The other thing I find a little bit disconcerting is on the main homepage, we have a lot of really great photos, but we have nothing about, the only salmon picture on the entire thing looks like it to be in the ocean out of Seward or Homer. There's no thing about dip netting, which is a major part of this area in July. I don't see any people fishing actually on the banks or boats going up and down. I see some frozen rivers and a couple of anchored out boats. There's no commercial fishing mentioned in there, no history about commercial fishing or showing that. There seems to be a lot of lacking in the major components, both commercial and sport industries in the city of Kenai, that I think should show and are a little bit lacking in that. As far as the iHeart Kenai itself, I mean, I don't really care much for the logo and stuff, and I think that could be room for updating, and I really would like to see that possibly branched out. The term iHeart Kenai, I like that, it's pretty good, but quite frankly, the actual logo itself seems to be a little bit dated and doesn't really show a lot of emphasis on the history of Kenai. I think we could probably update that. I'd like to see some definite changes. And like I said, there's more businesses. I'm a little concerned about the emphasis on the, you know, showing the restaurants and all that's great. Do we want to put a lot of emphasis on that when there's other websites that do that? I mean, we've got Yelp and those kind of things that do the exact same thing. I don't know how much more we want to dedicate to the website for that, or we could just highlight special businesses, you know, weekly or monthly on something like that and show a gamut more than just the emphasis on the restaurants and eating out. I think there's a huge, there's a lot of other apps and stuff that do the same thing when you Google on that. But those are my kind of big concerns. One other thing that came up with the Silver Salmon Derby that I was approached about a couple different times during the fundraiser portion of it was individuals that are local businesses getting calls from an out-of-state number as far as that. And they showed concern about why is an out-of-state number calling looking for money for a local Kenai event.
It's a fair question.
And I did bring it up to staff previously, and as an opinion, maybe we can get a number that would at least route it through a Kenai number, because some of these old timers don't want to see a number from Texas soliciting money for an event that they don't know about. So if we're going to continue to work through the Texas phone numbers, that might be something to look through to show that it does have local roots and that it is going to a local a cause. Those are just some of the main things I saw. Just looking through the website, there's a lot of data that could be used from other websites. KPED has a Kenai Peninsula Economic Development District, has a lot of the statistics on housing and weather and employment, and those can be linked into this website. I didn't find it. I dug a little bit, but I didn't see that exact website linked in there. I think that might be a good resource to add also.
So you've shared quite a bit of comments.
Sorry,
Yeah.
a lot have been going on in my head for months on this whole thing, but
Great.
yeah.
So on the work page, we do have quite a bit on there. Just a snapshot of commercial fishing, as well as oil and gas, as well as sport fishing. We do have links to KPED. A lot of the data that we've pulled for the website that is on the website right now comes from the help of KPED, as well as some other resources. In terms of links to businesses, so we have tried to create links that you can click on various pages to take people to the business pages. And again, we want to build that out even more. In terms of what that original website started as, is it was a landing page to direct them to the chamber and to the city. And we wanted to make sure that it had enough great footage and photography there to, basically capture someone's attention. It has grown. In terms of the dip netting, we do have information in the blog on subsistence fishing. It is something that we want to continue building out. I do have video and photography, although I feel like the quality of that video photography is not really as well as it should be. So there's actually quite a bit on the website that can be discovered that could address some of your concerns. And I do believe that moving forward, we want to continue to build it out to actually make it that much more of a resource for all those reasons. Again, people are going to the site and they are looking at things. In terms of the dining guide, yes, there's Yelp and there's Google My Business and there are things like that. But one of the leading things driving people to the website right now is people looking to discover the restaurants. They want to see a local's perspective on the restaurants. They don't care what Google has to say or what Yelp has to say. They want to see the perspective from the locals. And I think if we actually take that opportunity to represent those restaurants and other businesses, we can frame the narrative around this city. So I think, look, I totally agree with you that there is certainly room to grow, and we want to grow. We're very excited about it. We think it represents a really great opportunity both for the business community as well as for locals.
Further questions? I just had one, Coy, you gave a really good overview of, the audience you're reaching and the numbers and, sort of demographics and geographical areas. Do you have, and I don't know how you do this, I'm just running it through my mind how you would do this, but is there any way you can quantify effects at the end of like you got so many people look at the website, what does that result in how many people actually come here or plan a trip, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's the most difficult thing about destination marketing, right? Yeah. I mean, you want to try and connect the dots somehow. We're not selling anything on the website, so it's impossible for us to really measure a real value. Ultimately, what we tend to look at is, is tax dollars increasing during tourism season? Are more people moving to the city? Those are some of the metrics that we like to look at. Are there, more hotels that are being booked? We don't have access to that data right now, and I think that would be something that we work with the administration to get to be able to measure more. I think because this website initially started as something smaller and has grown into something much more powerful, I do think it's a good idea to start taking a harder look at those metrics. We can't see at the moment, it's not set up for this, we can't see where they click off and jump off the website. I know that it's possible to do that with some coding work where we can maybe potentially count how many clicks are happening and going to a restaurant, but then we still don't know how much they spend there. So I do think that's our biggest challenge in terms of trying to measure the benefit. We do know that it's getting a lot more exposure for the city than there ever was before. And we feel like that's going to translate into more people visiting over time and potentially moving here.
I was curious if you did any like surveys or some just cursory things like that. That would.
We haven't done that. No, sir.
Okay. Okay. Any further questions or comments?
Just real quick. So on the website, it does show that there's a merchandise sales.
Yeah.
That would be a quantitative. How have the sales been on that?
Yeah, so that's actually a conversation that I'd like to start with the chamber right now. So initially, when we launched that store, our intention wasn't to really generate a bunch of sales. It was actually to get people to become walking billboards for Kenai. You know, a big T-shirt says "I love Kenai," and I've got a mug and a T-shirt, and people ask me about it myself. Over time, the sales on that haven't been that great, and we've actually removed products over time because they either became discontinued or whatever. That account ties into the chamber's bank account and has really not generated anything within the last year. I have wanted to take that store down. I think that now at this point, the website is something much greater. Brittany, many years ago, or 2 years ago, I guess, asked me for that logo so that y'all could do your own printing for the Chamber of Commerce. And when I just met with Michelle recently, she said that she didn't have that logo and you guys were looking for a local vendor. So I did trade that with her so that you guys can actually benefit from that. I think that is one of the bigger sellers there in the store at the Chamber. The store doesn't generate any sales. It hasn't for a while. I would love to remove that and actually use that space for something else.
Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. West. Appreciate you coming up here, and I always enjoy your presentation and let us know kind of where we're going and what direction we're going with that. So,
Thank you. I really appreciate the time. I appreciate the questions as well. It's great to see you all again.
thank you. Next up, under scheduled public comment, we have college campus update with Dr. Keith Hamilton, president of the Alaska Christian College. Mr. Hamilton.
Thanks, Mayor and council members, for having me back for my sort of annual update on your Christian college. And Marion, I'm sorry, but I'm going to kind of stand. Is that okay? Yeah. So everybody can see what's going on up here. But I want to take you on an overview and then give you just a few updates at the end of what's happened since I was here last. So we've been around since 2001 on campus. We started 5 days after 9/11. That was our opening day. That was a hard day to open. But our mission statement is to empower Alaska natives through biblically based higher education and Christian formation to pursue excellence and character learning and service as followers of Christ. So a little bit of history if you don't know about the college. Who remembers the Ballard's family from years ago? It's their property that we bought in 2001. We bought it from CPCS. It was 10.5 acres at that time. An 8,400 square foot building. It had an indoor swimming pool inside of it. I think Leonard Ballard was the only guy in town with an indoor swimming pool. And we opened our doors again on September 16th, just a few days after 9/11. So we had 22 students that first year from 7 different, I would say, ethnic groups, most of them Alaskans. And as of today, we still are averaging between 85 and 95% of our student body are Alaska Indigenous students. Started with 16 self-funded faculty and staff, and today we're about 63 staff. And so we began it just as a 1-year non-accredited Bible college. And of course, we've grown to become something different, and we'll come over that in a moment here. But we did start with about 10.5. We're now at 29.5 acres. We started with 1 building. We're now at 20 buildings. And almost all of that built by volunteer labor. Work teams from the Lesser 48 coming up here, and folks from Alaska helping us out. And they show up. They love to fish in our river. They spend thousands and thousands of dollars in Kenai and Soldotna. And they come back and they live here. Many of them have moved up here. So it's really been advantageous for the booming of our community, at least. We started with those, I should say, as of May 31, we're debt-free. We don't owe anybody anything on all those buildings and all those acres. Really, really a great testimony. We've added, since we began, 2 36-bed dormitories, some cabins. We now have 4 apartment buildings, a quadplex, 2 quadplexes, a triplex, and a duplex, some cabins, New Hope Counseling Center I'll talk to you about in a minute, a small chapel, and then a 6-classroom building, a big 8-car garage. I think it says 6, an 8-car garage, and even a yurt. If you're in Alaska, you got to have a yurt, right? So this is our classroom building. Again, 6 classrooms there. It includes a computer lab and also a science lab. Our conference center we call Peninsula Conference Center. It has now 72 beds between the 2 and the middles of dining hall. I should ask, who's ever been in our campus before? Raise your hand all around the room. Yeah, lots of you have. Great. This is an idea of where our students come from. So you see a lot of smattering, but most of them are on the West Coast. Most of the students who come are Chupik, Yupik, and Inupiaq Eskimo by race. We started again with those few staff again, and we have 63 now. We have part-time, full-time volunteers. Some are self-supported. Our budget's grown from 500,000 to now 3.3 million, and that is employing all those people and generating a lot of funds for the Kenai Peninsula. We also, today, we began New Hope Counseling Center in 2003 to address the needs of Alaska Native students that are attending ACC, and later the Kenai Peninsula community, and I'll go in a little more in depth in that. But in 2012 was a big year for us, and now we earned accredited status from the Association for Biblical Higher Education out of Orlando, Florida. I'm going there next week. Unfortunately, every February they force me to go down to their conference in Florida. And we've also been, of course, approved and authorized by the Alaska Commission on Post-Secondary Education and the U.S. Department of Education, which means we're fully legit. The vision I want to share with you of ACC is to be the premier college of choice for Alaska Native students so that our students graduate and follow and serve Christ within the church and the larger society. We are the world's largest Alaska Native faith-based college. We're the only Alaska Native faith-based college. So it's pretty cool. We offer 4 degrees, behavioral health, Christian ministry, general studies, and paraprofessional education. So our students finish their AA degrees. Most of them transfer out to other colleges and universities to get their bachelor's. Some have gone on, of course, their master's as well. Some of them just go back to the village and are happy with their AA degrees. And a lot of jobs open for them, especially the parapro. 100% of our students that have graduated, have gone seeking for a job, have gotten jobs within the first few months of going back to their villages. We offer also life-changing education, helping them to get into the workforce, returning to rural Alaska, as I mentioned, their home, continuing on for their degrees. And we are a residential community. We had 104 students enrolled in 2020. We grew every single year until 2020. Then what happened? COVID happened. And so we have dropped down. We're still trying to capture that, but our funnel closed for 2 years of grabbing students. And so we're on the rebound right now. And a very personalized approach, because we have a very intensive academic support. Our students who come from rural Alaska, unfortunately, have some of the worst test scores, especially in English and math. And so we have a lot of developmental courses to get them up to college rigor. Spend a lot of money, a lot of time with that through our Student Engagement Center. Some of these we're not. We're not a 4-year college. Again, we're AA degree granting. We are not an online college, except during COVID, we had no choice. We're not a place where anyone can teach. In fact, our classes are taught all by master's and doctoral degree professors. We are not only for Alaska Natives, although we're 90%, because we invite anybody to this unique college experience. And the big thing here is that we are not a cult at the end of Royal Place and East Poppy. We encourage you to drive anytime into our campus. The doors are open. A little about the conference center. We do rent out our conference center during the summer months especially to conferences, to folks. I know the community have used us many times. In that conference center, we have housing for up to 152 total beds on campus. We have a 200-seat conference room. Our dining option is about 150 in the dining hall. And I have to tell you that if there's ever a large conference that wanted to come to the Kenai, between KPC's beds and our beds and our food facility, we could house a large conference. They have over 100 beds. We have 150 beds. So it could be a boon if anybody wants to jump on that. I mentioned New Hope. 2003, we opened New Hope Counseling Center as its own 501c3. It's separate from the college, yet it's on our campus, and actually my wife's the executive director. And began offering in 2006 to the community also services, and like last year, approximately 3,000 client hours were seen through their doors. So it's an enormous benefit to the community, especially post-COVID. We have waiting lists. I'm sure other places as well in both cities have waiting lists for mental health. But it's an amazing, amazing part of what we do. Every single one of our students is offered free counseling services. And I just want to tell you the ACC Good Neighbor commitment is this. Our doors are open for all the community because we wish to serve the greater Soldotna Kenai community by offering our facilities, our staff, and our students to assist in bringing a better life to all who live here. We don't have any walls at ACC. It is your campus. You're welcome, just like KPC, to be over on campus and hang out. I do want to say that our students put hundreds and thousands of hours of volunteer work into our communities here because they're required as a part of their degree program to do community service whether it's for a faith-based or non-faith-based, it doesn't matter. You see a group of students pulling out of an ACC van and walking into the Salvation Army. They're not there to buy clothes. They're there to serve and to put their hours in to help serve our community. Just wanted to take you at the end here to our Vision 2020 campaign. We ended up right as COVID was kind of ramping up. We raised $5 million of private money, and we're building this gymnasium right here. Who's been by our campus has seen that huge metal structure? Yeah, that's ours, and it's being built by right now this week, two 75-year-old volunteers are working on it this week. The ravens have been in there eating up all of our styrofoam for the installation. So it's almost closed off, and it snowed. The first snow in December, 3 days after we got our roof on. So we have no snow inside of it or ice, which is really cool. But I want to show you what it's going to look like when it's all done. It's going to be a high school-sized gymnasium that's going to meet the needs of our students and also the greater Kenai Peninsula community. And this is why we do what we do. This is last year's graduating class, 9 students, most of them off again doing great things as they go back to their homes or they go off to get their degree programs, and some of them also enter the military. They want to go serve their country. That's why we do what we do, and yeah, I'm sticking to it. So I'll take questions.
Thank you for the presentation. Any questions for Dr. Hamilton? Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton, for coming. I just want to say, I think it's great that we're driving our students in Alaska, educating them, and then for the most part, retaining them in our state. I mean, there's so much value to seeing kids sticking in our state, and especially when they're coming out with some great degrees. I mean, we definitely need to look at the future of our workforce. So I think that's great. And I actually find it really interesting that you incorporate a community service aspect to it. How many hours would you say that they donate?
Yeah, minimum is 10 per semester, so 20 for their year, 2 years, 40 hours per student.
I think that's awesome. I think that's a great addition to the program. So thank you for adding that in. It's a benefit to the community.
Actually, our creditors require it, so
Okay.
we want to do it, but yeah, we have to do it. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Vice Mayor Bazin.
Thank you, Mayor. So Keith, you said you've got 2 gentlemen working on your new gymnasium.
Yeah.
That's going to take them a while to build this. When are they going to complete it?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's only certain things we can do right now at this stage, but as soon as later spring and then our summer, 300 more volunteers coming up, we're going to be doing a lot of sheetrocking, and we're going to be painting, and we're going to be moving quickly. My goal is that by December, we're going to be operational, have our CO, and up and running. It won't be all done yet, though. It'll be, the floor will be in, the hoops will be in, it'll be heated, there'll be bathrooms, it'll have the water systems it needs for fire suppression, but it's not going to have all the fancy stuff we want to do quite yet.
Any further questions or comments? Councilmember Dothan.
It's like to say thank you for this. It's a really amazing, if you haven't been over there to see it, that the dining hall is gorgeous, and what you guys have come from to what you are now is pretty amazing. I remember being over there right out of high school working on those cabins and helping out over there and putting in windows over there, and those cabins are the smallest thing on the campus now. So
They are.
it's pretty amazing how far you've come. Thank you for your service.
Yeah, thank you.
Further questions or comments? I know you've done this several times, giving us an update and overview of it, and certainly appreciate that to keep us informed of certainly where you're going and your enrollment and things like that, and the service you provide for rural Alaska students. I think might work better, at least to start out with a smaller class and more individual instruction. So
It is true. Just to close, Mayor, I just want to say thank you to you and the community, because our students feel really safe here. When they walk down the street or they go into a store, unlike Anchorage, they get treated well. And they want to live here. So many have stayed, like, go home to your village. No, they want to stay here. So many of them live in our community now who have found this a great place to live and raise their families. I have to tell you just one brief story, and I'll sit down because my time's up. But we had a student who came and got in trouble one night, and the police could have ran that student in for what they did. And instead, the police officer called me, he knows me personally, and said, hey, I got 2 choices here. I can either release the student to you, Keith, and you can handle it, or I can run him to jail. What would you like me to do? And I said, well, I will take the student back. Drove the student over to campus, outside of their jurisdiction, to bring them, because they knew that we could probably do better for that student than they would be able to, given the circumstance and the freedom to do that. That's the kind of community that embraces our students, and I'm grateful for you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. That concludes our item B, scheduled public comments. We're on item C, unscheduled public comments. Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Anybody online?
There are no hands raised.
Okay, very good. Seeing that, that'll bring us to public hearings, and the first public hearing before us.
Mayor?
Oh, yeah, we can take a brief at ease here, 5-minute break. back on the record. So for our first public hearing, item D1 is ordinance number 3332-2023, amending Kenai Municipal Code, section 3.10.070, livestock within the city limits to allow a maximum of 12 chicken hens to be kept on certain lots less than 40,000 square feet within the city of Kenai. This was on our meeting of January 4th, 2023. It's introduced by council. It was referred to for recommendation to the January 25th, 2023 Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Public hearing by council is scheduled for today, February 1st, 2023. The motion is on the floor, and I just wanted to so we have a motion to enact on the floor. And just wanted to I know there's folks here, that's probably the main reason a lot of folks are here in person and online, and just want to kind of go over how we'll get through public testimony here. So we'll take public testimony from those in the audience first. And for those on Zoom who would like to testify, please raise your hand by pressing the raise hand button, or if you join Zoom from a phone call, dial pound 9, star 9 rather, to raise your hand. And we'll get through the public testimony in the chambers here. We'll go to the Zoom attendees. The clerk will call your name. Please identify if you are a resident of the city or if you live outside the city limits. And individuals are only allowed to comment once, 3 minutes. So we'll open up to public testimony within chambers here. Is there anybody that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023? Please come forward and just state whether you're a resident or not. In your name also, please.
Here. Okay. Good evening. My name is Dan Canetta. I live in the Woodland subdivision at 708 Alder Court. I am not opposed to the raising of chickens or harvesting fresh eggs, but I'm not supportive of this ordinance, which would allow chickens to be raised in a densely populated neighborhood like the Woodland subdivision, and would expand the raising of chickens from 28% to 96% of all lots within the city. This is not a balanced proposal, as it only considers the will of those who want to raise chickens in a residential area at the expense of others. There are more equitable ways to accomplish such changes. To bring further clarity to this issue, we need to ask the right question. If you ask the question, do you want fresh eggs and food security, then the answer is yes. But if you ask the question, are the proposed changes to the city code appropriate for lots less than 40,000 square feet in a residential zone, then the answer is no. Don't confuse good with right. Is it a good thing to promote the raising of chickens? Yes. Is it right to impose the raising of chickens on residents in a densely populated neighborhood? No. When I bought my house in 1988, I deliberately chose a lot in a residential neighborhood because I didn't want to live next to farm animals, a pack of sled dogs, a gravel pit, or other disruptive nuisances, and I certainly didn't want to live next door to where chickens could be slaughtered. If I wanted to live in an area with less regulations, I could have bought property outside city limits, as there are plenty of lots to choose from. I enjoy the amenities that the city of Kenai has to offer, and I don't want to see the character and integrity of our residential neighborhoods compromised. I feel that this ordinance is a violation of public trust, and here's why. When I bought my house, I trusted the zoning to protect the values and integrity of the Woodland subdivision, and I trusted that the land uses within those zones would be upheld, but I'm now finding out how easily those values can be compromised by an ordinance that hasn't even been through one work session. This ordinance is not a balanced, this ordinance as written is not a balanced proposal. Currently, the city code allows for chickens to be raised on 28% of the city's lots, but if this ordinance passes, then it would allow for chickens to be raised on 96% of all city lots. This would create a complete imbalance for those who want to raise chickens in the residential neighborhood and those who don't. Although the proposed amended ordinances by council members Askin and Naxted gives the appearance of a compromise, it really isn't, because it is not a balanced proposal, as it still allows for chickens to be raised on 96% of all lots. If you really want to expand the raising of chickens in our community, there are more equitable ways to accomplish this effort. On page 39 of your packet, I've proposed 3 alternatives for consideration, but I'd like you to focus on alternatives 2 or 3 because it creates a more balanced proposal. Thank you for your time.
Questions for Mr. Canetta, Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Canetta, for coming and testifying. You gave a lot of data about land being affected. How did you come across that data, and how did you get those numbers?
I was working with your planning director, Linda Mitchell. I wanted to make sure my data was right because what I set up here, I certainly didn't want to have it contradict anything she said. So I got those numbers from her, and some of those numbers are actually on the one of your and you're talking about the percentages, the 28%, the 96%, and
Yes.
and so on. It's just if on page 9 of your map, or page 9 of the packet, there's some data there that tells how many lots in the key there. It has the proposed amendment would allow chickens, hens on lots less than 40,000 square feet. That number, 3,307, there's a number there. And I got the total number from Linda. Anyways, the short answer to your question is that's where I got my numbers from.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Canetta? Councilmember Dothett?
Quick question, I guess, would be for staff about the data there, if I can go to staff.
Yes, if you have a question, we would put.
Yeah, just for
We have Ms. Mitchell
clarification
back there.
for Lynn, the planning director. What percentage of land, not number of lots, would be affected by this ordinance, the total land mass in the city?
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel and Councilmember Dothett. So the percentage of land that would be affected is approximately 6% of the land. As you can see with the map right there, most of the green is rural. 90% of our land is actually rural lands. So to answer your question, Councilmember Dothett, 6% would be affected by this ordinance.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Basin?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Canetta, when you moved into the subdivision, Woodland subdivision, do you have covenants there? And were they active, or have they ever been active, do you know?
I don't know. I'm sure there are covenants there. I went to one meeting where you organize a neighborhood, to enforce those covenants. It's difficult, I know from working at the borough, if you're trying to enforce those covenants and just have the neighborhood do it, it's kind of difficult to do that. It ends up, in my understanding, if you really want to do something, it ends up being a civil matter. So those covenants, to me, don't have a lot of teeth to it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I did have a question from Linda. I just thought we had to wait. So can I ask administration a clarification?
I would suggest that if it doesn't have a bearing or clarification for the testimony, that we would wait till it comes back to council, but only if it pertains to
Okay.
testimony of the.
Yes. So can I get a clarification from our planning and zoning director? It is 6% of land affected. Is it still 28% of land allowed currently, or do those numbers all change?
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel and Councilmember Winger. That I don't have the number ready right now, but I can have that answer for you when we do more questions later.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions of Mr. Canetta? Councilmember Naxton?
Thank you. Mr. Canetta, you kind of ran out of time there, and I was wondering, you came very prepared, it seems. So, but you had alternative or suggestions 2 and 3 that are in our packet.
Yeah.
Rather than me scrolling down there, could you kind of briefly tell us what those are, without going on too much?
Yeah.
Good.
So on page 39 of your packet. So alternative 2, basically, the intent there is to add the RS zone to that to also, so no livestock would be allowed in the RS zones, which would be the Woodland subdivision. The strike through the RU, that's a mistake. That was section B. And also in part H there, the intent is to get the RS into that, and the RU was a mistake as well. And I'll expand on that just a little bit here. So what happens if you do that? By including the RS zone, suburban residential, into section 1 and part B and part H above, it will help to preserve the character and integrity of our residential neighborhoods. And because the RR zone, the rural residential, is not included in that above language, it will expand the raising of chickens in the RR zone from lots that are more than 40,000 square feet or greater to lots that are less than 40,000 square feet. This would seem to be a reasonable compromise because the RR zone accounts for 72% of Kenai's total land mass. And if I could just point to the map here, that green that you see, most of that, and I checked with Linda today about that, that represents 72% of the Kenai's total land mass. So to me, when you write this ordinance and you just exempt out the residential zones, those residential zones are not a lot. You still have this big land mass that you can raise chickens in. And there's the VIP subdivision, there's the subdivisions along Beaver Loop, and there's other subdivisions there. And that would seem to be a more reasonable compromise. But to take that 72% and then go after the rest of it, which I think is at 6%, I might be confused here, and then go after the rest of it, I hate to say this, but it just seems a little bit greedy.
Mr. Canetta, did you want to go over alternative? I think you covered alternative 2 there, but then there's alternative 3 also.
Alternative 3, okay, so alternative 3, so I proposed this with Linda, and I said, well, what would it look like? So right now, what's allowed in that green area, you have to have a lot, or no, I'll back up a little bit. Right now, you can only raise chickens in any zone that's 40,000 square feet or greater. So I asked her, what would it look like if we change the code to say you can raise chickens on lots, they only have to be 20,000 square feet or greater in any zone. And so what that looks like, let's see. So I'm missing part of my data here, but what it comes out to be is if you made that change and you made the code so that you could raise lots on any lot 20,000 square feet or greater, it would go from 28% that you can raise them now to 41%, and I think it added, I think we said 600, it would add 617 more lots. So if you want to look at it from a lots point of view or a acreage point of view or percentage point of view, the percentage is 28% to 41% or an additional 617 lots. That would seem to be a more reasonable compromise. And then it would get it away from the smaller lots. You'd have almost a half acre. And if you did it with lots, that would seem to be reasonable because these lots are bigger. You can have adequate buffer zones, realistic buffer zones, realistic setbacks. And that lot, just having a lot that size would naturally solve a lot of problems, I think.
Further questions for Mr. Canetta? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in chambers that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023? You could just state your name and whether you're a city resident or not.
Yes, my name is Ron Isaacs. I live at 620 Cedar Drive in Woodland. And he's right. I don't think any of them lots in Woodland are over 20,000 square feet even. So you're going to make a whole, that whole Woodland subdivision, a lot of places in town where the 6% of the people live. There's going to be a lot of arguments, fights. 12 chickens is a lot of chickens. I'd be eating chicken quite a bit if they get out and come on my property, you know. And I can see there's been a lot of fights in the back of Woodland subdivision already. That woman got off almost 50 chickens, the people that live around her said at one time. So I don't know, I'm not back there, but I think 40,000, just my opinion, 40,000 square foot, under that, when you put that regulation in, I like his ideas pretty well. There's going to be, it'll be a headache. Do you know how many dogs are in Woodland subdivision? And if you start putting a dozen chickens around there, it's just going to be a madhouse. And they won't even have to get a conditional use permit, will they? You know, you can't keep track of that. And there's going to be so many fights going on. There already has been back there. So I just wanted to throw that in, you know. I can see there's going to be problems coming up. So I just wanted to find this out tonight to come see what it was all about. So that's all I have.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Isaacs? Councilman Weiner.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Isaacs, for coming and testifying tonight. To this point, have you seen any chickens running around your?
When I went back before to the back street, what's the name of it there? That's where one of the guys lives that was really having a problem. Yeah, I saw chickens then.
Did you see them running loose in your neighborhood?
No, not in my neighborhood. He's in back of me a ways. But if you put this in, they're going to be running loose in my neighborhood.
Okay.
And especially, I hope you can control the roosters. I know it says no roosters, but there's going to be roosters get in the project there somehow.
And I just want to address your dogs. I know that you guys have a lot of dogs and cats. I filled a lot of phone calls from complaints on those.
On which dogs?
That run loose in your neighborhood. So I do know that your neighborhood is plagued with cats and dogs.
Oh, yeah.
So if you see, just out of curiosity, if you see my cat running loose, are you going to eat my cat?
No.
But you'd eat my chicken.
No, but I would eat your chickens if they come on my property.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything?
Hold on. I see. Did you have a question? Oh, sorry. Any other questions of Mr. Isaacs? Thank you. Is there anybody else in chamber that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023? Please come forward, give your name and whether you're a Kenai resident or not.
Can I stand? Thank you. Hi, I'm Anthony Ruiz. I'm a Kenai resident. I live in the Woodland Estates. I'm not even actually sure right now if my property would fit the limits or be able to walk, but it doesn't matter because that's not what it's important to. This is a simple right for every single person to be allowed to survive. If you allow me to read just for a little bit so I can collect my thoughts. I just want to know, does anyone actually trust the supply chain, the federal government, any policies they're making, anything that allows groceries to go down, gas to go down? No, I don't, and no one else should. All humans have the right to provide for themselves and be self-sufficient. We are not subjects that need others to allow us to be able to survive. We can provide for ourselves by raising chickens, growing vegetables. That's what we should be allowed to do. And no size of your property should, or your wallet should discredit you from being allowed to provide for yourself. Why, if you can't afford a large property or half of the rural Kenai to grow and raise animals, why would you not be allowed to? If you can only afford a small property and a small house, but you have to spend your life savings on groceries instead of buying a chicken that could refeed you, how is that fair? It seems like it's only punishing the people who can't afford to buy groceries already. This ordinance is required to allow humans to live slightly more freely. Even if 90% of the capable purchasable lots right now would be allowed to by this ordinance to raise chickens, that's still inhumane. It should be 100%. Again, going back to we should all be allowed to provide for ourselves. Don't take the food out of people's mouths for your ability to live in a subjective, delusional paradise. You live with airports, dogs, moose, bears, and chickens are where we're crossing the line here. And yes, we were barked at by someone's dog who got loose. And yes, we complained about it on Facebook. And yes, they defended themselves. But again, like, I love that you said it. I wouldn't eat your dog. I didn't shoot your dog, which I probably should have because I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. But I didn't. I just backed it off. So I'm not crazy. I'm not trying to kill other people's animals or eat them. I just want us to be able to live and provide for ourselves. Now, wanting to live in this paradise when reality is really dark, any honorable man would say that is selfish. Because what is peace and quiet while you are living there watching your neighbor starve? Is that a peace? Is that paradise? I don't think so. And if your dogs are barking because of chickens, control your dogs. Has that not always been the way that we were? We took care of what is our responsibility. And if your dog is making noise, then you take care of your dog. Thank you.
Anthony, first of all, do you mind, I'll have to ask you if it would take questions, but would you spell your last name, please?
Ruiz, R-U-I-Z.
R-U-I-Z, Ruiz. Okay, very good. Thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Ruiz, correct?
Yes,
okay. I agree with your comments about supply chain issues. I did speak with the Office of Emergency Management, which is where I have some background. And, you know, their statement is, in an emergency, we have 72 hours of food supply. So 72 hours of food supply is what we have available at our grocery stores. And that's right now, this time of the year, if we were to have a catastrophic disaster. If we were to have a catastrophic disaster during dip-net season in July, we would have under a 12-hour supply. And that's factored into our grocery stores and the convenient marts. And that's even with 3 Bears coming on in the Sterling area. So the data isn't very supportive. They said it would take 96 hours to get food supplies in, 96 hours before the borough could get that in on a disaster. So they ask for the people to be self-reliant, because in a disaster, if you are self-reliant, it helps in the disaster recovery. So that is direct information given by OEM today. 72 hours supply on hand is what we have in a catastrophic disaster. So do I trust the supply chains? Absolutely not. I trust you being prepared.
There's no question here, but there could be. I mean, this could
Councilman
be
Winger, do you have
later.
hang on, Councilman Jackson. Councilman Winger, do you have a question for Mr. Ruiz?
No, but other people have made statements, so I'll just end that and thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023 in chambers? Mr. Malloy, former Councilmember Malloy and Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Council. My name is Bob Malloy. I'm a property owner with my home at 513 Ash Avenue in Woodland Subdivision. It's Part 1. My home is in one of the suburban residential zones, the RS zone. My spouse and I have lived there for 38 years, and we raised our daughter there, a 1988 graduate of Kenai Central High School. I oppose this ordinance as presently written. I want to thank Council members Nackstead and asking for the amendments. Excuse me. For the amendments that they put, but I think that's only a starting point. I think the ordinance does need additional amendments to protect the residential character of the environment of our zone and to protect public health, and I've got a few in mind, similar to what Mr. Canetta said. One thing you could do is accept out the RS zone just like the RS1 and RS2 zone is accepted. Alternatively, you could accept out Woodland subdivision or at least parts 1 and 4. Or you could make it apply to lots 20,000 square feet or greater. You could add text that the keeping of chickens on lots less than 40,000 square feet is for personal use only, not for commercial use. You could enact specific standards for dimensions, materials, and appearance of a containment structure, and including protections against bears and predators. You could require an application, at least for a license or for a permit, for lots less than 40,000 square feet. If the applicant is a tenant, you could require the applicant to submit proof of the owner's consent, like they did in Wasilla. You could put the burden of proof on the chicken keeper to show that his or her containment structure complies with the requirements of the code, standards, materials, setbacks, and stuff like that, rather than putting the burden on the adjacent property owner or on the city. That was an issue that planning and zoning addressed. Do not put the burden on the adjacent property owner, please. Also, for public health, 310-080 is limited to disposal of dog waste. There's no code on disposal of chicken waste, and there certainly should be. 310-040 doesn't require a person who keeps chickens to destroy deceased chickens infected with diseases like bird flu, which certainly would be appropriate. So if you do make amendments tonight, I ask that you please postpone a final vote on the ordinance as enacted, as amended, and refer the ordinance as amended to planning and zoning for an additional work session where some of these proposals could be addressed, and then for them after public hearing, because you can't make a decision at a work session, they could follow it with a public hearing and then make some recommendations to council. I'm sorry, I just have a few more. And
Go ahead and wrap up.
For a little bit.
Go ahead and wrap up,
That's
Mr.
all right.
Malloy.
Maybe like less than a minute. So while this ordinance is in Title III, it does involve considerations of zoning in the land use table. The rural residential zone is different from suburban residential zones, and I don't have any issue with the rural residential zone in this ordinance or the proposed amendments by the council members relating to that. It does accept 2 of the 3 suburban residential zones, and there's no express rationale for that. And the commission acts in advisory capacity to you, and they also, one of their duties is to promote, the interest in community planning, and community planning is certainly involved in this. And they also asked for the ordinance to be referred back to them, and this would allow them to spend some more time on it, which would be valuable to you. It's not time sensitive, or at least I haven't heard, a reason why it is time sensitive. So please vote to postpone this ordinance and refer it for planning, another work session and public hearing of planning zoning, if you do make amendments tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Malloy? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in chambers here that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023? And I would say that I would ask that we all be respectful of each other here, and we should always do that. In life, you have differing opinions, but how you handle that speaks to your character, I think, and that's what we need to be doing. So is there anybody else that would like to speak in chambers? Mr. Howard. Just state your name and whether you live in
Howard is
resident.
my name, and I live at 703 Poplar. You guys have all heard what I've had to say about all this, and I've thought, as Mr. Dothit had said, I have to get a dog license for my dog, and we allowed so many dogs. I wonder why we don't really have a chicken permit fee of maybe $20. For sure, I think 12 chickens are way too many. But if we were to have this pass with a smaller amount of chickens and a $20, I'm just using that figure. Animal control would have a name and an address for every person with a chicken. And that way we wouldn't have these behind closed doors chicken people. And I thought planning and zoning's idea of not side yards, not front yards, but if you guys, the only place I could get away from it all was in my little backyard, and it is little, it doesn't really go from myself to the lady over there and back. So while backyards was not a bad idea to try to keep neighbors from having up and downs, it's not really quite enough. And I think really, I don't know about aviation flu that much at all, but I'm afraid about the wild birds that I feed in my little bird feeders. Is this going to open up maybe something like that to occur? And I'm not trying to say, but it comes from chicken pens and wild birds, and it's probably just a matter of time, you guys, before maybe the birds are all gone. So I'd like to say, as the last spokesman said, to take it to a work session or something is something, but I would hope that we could just table this for now and come back to this a couple of years from now. Our little subdivision we're 10,000 square foot lots in there, and it's just too hard to try to get yourself out of everybody's way with chickens or dogs or cats. And I don't think the cat and dog situation is as bad, maybe on my side of it all, but I know up into the subdivision going back towards town, it seems to be a lot of activity like that, and I won't argue that. Otherwise, thanks for your time, and I know you guys have all heard me before, so any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Howard? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in chambers that would like to speak to ordinance 3332-2023? Ms. Schmidt?
Christine Schmidt, 513 Ash Avenue. Like Bob said, we've lived in Woodland subdivision since 1985. I want to encourage you to postpone acting on the ordinance tonight and have a work session with planning and zoning to consider more protections for the residents of the city. I asked the clerk to put the Wasilla ordinance in the packet. They have a reasonable ordinance with regulations and including putting poultry in the land use table where it should be. Also, to consider various amendments. I agree with the amendments that are on the table tonight, or will be on the table tonight, potentially, such as reducing the number of chickens and backyard, limiting it to the backyard and so forth. I also had written on page 42 in your packet several other potential amendments, including, as stated earlier, exempting the RS zone from the ordinance, reducing the lot sizes to 20,000 feet from 40,000 feet, and limiting the number of chickens more like 4. Also limiting chickens to the backyard, adding specific language that restricts chickens to personal use only, requiring licensing or permits like dog licenses, requiring containment within the setbacks and standards for the shelters, and requiring homeowner consent. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms. Schmidt? I just got a quick one. Just could you elaborate on that homeowner's consent? What you?
Well, our neighborhood, our subdivision has a lot of renters, and so people do. You know, the renters, like one of the renters came before you last year, who had started out with an educational 6 chickens, and it ended up to be 40. So I think you should get the homeowner to consent, in the permit process or license, get the homeowner's consent to that happening, because they may not know that this is even happening.
Yep.
So I think that's important.
Thank you for that. It's clear to me now. Any other questions of Ms. Schmidt? Seeing none, thank you. Is there anybody else in chambers that would like to speak to ordinance number 3332-2023? Please come forward and give your name and let us know if you're a resident of the city of Kenai.
Barbara Kennedy, and I am just inside of city limits, and been listening to a lot of really good testimony here from like my neighbors. And Mr. Canetta, is it? Yes. We should have stopped there. He had very valid arguments towards very decent compromises. He's not for it. I'm very much for it. I found him to have a lot of good compromises, things that I could live with on my side of the fence. And there's been a lot of very decent arguments for both sides. And it really boils down to there's a particular subdivision that may not want to participate as much as the other areas. And I'm going, okay, I agree with the other gentleman that maybe we should exclude him or that particular area as somewhere that's just not ready or set up for chicken habitation. But in general, everyone said so many great things, the sustainability of it, the willingness of participants, because as I said, they're worried about there being a chicken everywhere. Not everybody's good at raising animals. They're not. There's going to be some trial and error, and it's just more compromise. And I hope you guys can find a way to make most of us happy, as I know that you can't make everybody happy all the time. That's just not how it works. But I appreciate you guys taking this seriously and looking at the options offered, because even though me and him are on opposite sides, I agree with him. I do. He makes very valid points, and I hope that you guys go with more of a middle ground. He's thought about his research. Like, I'm super happy. His last meeting, I heard his testimony, he heard mine, and I thought, I can't get along. Like, we don't see eye to eye. And after a brief conversation, yeah, we do. We're both going to have to compromise. And I'm hoping that's what you can find in this ordinance. As for licensing, that is, people have to be accountable, because not every dog in the city is licensed. That's someone has to take responsibility and file for a license. So just like any other law, the people who are law-abiding will license, the people who are not going to, and that's where the majority of the problem's going to come from in the first place, is the people who are not licensing or caring about what the ordinances say. So I don't know that that one's going to be very valid. And any questions for me?
Any questions? Councilmember Dawson.
Just for curious, with this, and I believe I'm basing off your previous testimony at P&Z, you currently have, I'm not worried about the chickens. I was worried about the lot size. You said, I believe you said you had the half-acre lot?
0.46.
Roughly?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what my lot light said.
Okay.
I looked.
So it'd be in that 20,000
And
square foot.
that is adequate, because I looked for the biggest lot. I would not want to keep chickens on a postage stamp city lot. It's doable with like 3, but my neighbors would be a lot closer, and I don't know that I'd be very happy with that. But where my neighbors are very far flung because of the lot sizes, I don't think it's an issue. Is the best neighbors I have, I never know what animals they have because I never see them. And they have a lot of animals.
You said you have 4 chickens. How big of a coop do you have for those 4? Or how much space does it take up for your lot?
Do you know one of those little Cadre, I think they called it the 6-hen or a 12-hen hut? It's probably 4 by 4, I would say, is the actual coop. You lean towards the smaller side because it gets cold, smaller space, easier to keep them warm. The run is 8 by 10, and it has lots of upper spaces for them to spread out and be off the ground, looking out across the yard and stuff.
Okay.
And
So roughly total coop size, but your coop's probably inside your pen, I'm assuming, or is it outside?
Outside for accessibility.
Okay.
So that way you can access the feed and everything on like a man door, and then the run itself has its own door to walk into.
Okay. So 10 feet by 12 feet
Yeah.
is about the space that you have now, and that's,
It's adequate. It's maintainable.
Okay.
It needs more insulation, but every chicken coop needs more insulation.
thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Axon.
Over here.
Yes, sir.
I think I heard you have 4 chickens. is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that an adequate number of hens for your family for eggs?
No, but one of the reasons I have them is my mother is disabled and has a traumatic brain injury, and it's how I get her to go outside every day, no matter what the weather. Because she'll skip the mailbox, but she will always go outside to check her chickens. And I would like to have 6. She's pretty content with 4. My 7-year-old is over there, and I'm hoping to add possibly a 4-H or a show animal to the bunch. Is ideally what I'd like to have 6. But 4 is maintainable right now. Don't have too many animals.
Vice Mayor Basin?
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate having your daughter here too. She's been great.
Thank you very much. Usually she sees me up here and comes to hang out.
So, can I consider you a chicken expert?
I actually can tell you more than I want to tell you about chickens.
4 to 6 hens. What would they typically lay here in a week? What would you see?
It's breed specific. There are heavy layers and light layers. Some are lazy. I got some lazy girls. If you got something like a Rhode Island Red or a production bird, you would see, well, 7 eggs a week per chicken. So I think they say, like average, I wrote it down, 3 to 5 hens will give you a dozen a week. If you want more, 6 to 10 will get you 2 dozen a week. So we're a little bit egg heavy. I like to see 2 dozen a week, but I can live with the 3 to 5, because I can live with a dozen a week. Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So do you see egg production dropping off in the wintertime?
Always, even with lights, because they molt, is they take a break. And I accept that's part of the nature of the beast, that they do take a break. Mine have been lovely and have staggered. So I had one molting in September, another one in December. So I haven't lost all of my egg production because they've just kind of staggered out as to who was stopping for that month.
When you say that if you have a hen that is considered to be a prolific egg layer, that 7 eggs a week is probably summertime.
Usually April through August, September-ish.
But it does drop off in the wintertime.
It does.
even
It
with
doesn't
lice.
completely stop. And some girls don't usually, like some of them just won't take a break.
Okay.
Just so very breed specific.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Mom.
Further questions? Councilmember Weir.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy, for coming. So do you do any meat chickens, or are you strictly just eggs?
You know, I am good at animal husbandry, and specifically like from the egg hatching, chick rearing, fledging, to maintaining the flock and like overall health and stuff. And I didn't do meat chickens because I'm a sissy. I don't like to butcher my own stuff. I like to be from the egg to the day it leaves, and then it shows back up in my freezer. Like I hire somebody to deal with the messy stuff. My neighbor had brought in 100 Cornish crosses, and his first attempt, he lost probably 60% of that flock. And it was just catastrophic loss of money. The next year he gave them to me, and I think I lost 12 chicks. I do not recommend meat birds. As far as like, I bought an odd lot. Murray McMurray will give you 25 random chickens of all variety to raise. They are uniquely different per breed, just as like a Malamute is different from a Pomeranian. Until you know what you're getting, you don't know what you're getting. And those were the most disgusting, eating, pooping, horrifying little animals I've ever raised. They're nothing like your normal egg layers. Meat birds are a completely different thing, and I prefer not to engage in them. I'm not in it for the meat. I have dual purpose birds. If I wanted to, I could, but they don't grow as fast, they don't grow as big. They're still very edible though.
Okay, and then being that you have chickens, what do you do with the waste? We've heard testimony about concerns of waste, so how do you utilize the waste? What's your process?
I put in raised beds and a compost pile. And the compost pile, everything goes into a fenced-in little compost section where my yard clippings and all the other little yard bits go for decomposition, and you turn it throughout the year. the chickens will help turn it too. And then I have raised beds in the garden. And first thing in the spring I do is I go unload the beds, dump the compost heap in, and then refill and garden off the top of it. Usually I think it's 4 to 6 weeks if you're doing hot stuff, so you can make it process faster so that you get good, rich nitrogen, phosphorus fertilizer. And chicken manure is like the #1 organic fertilizer in the world. And it beats the steer manure you buy in the bag tenfold. So why am I spending $50 on a bag of stuff when I get breakfast and my fertilizer for my failing garden at the same time?
I very much agree. I get stuck with steer manure
Yeah,
in my garden.
It's not the same.
And then just lastly, with the fact that you compost and you're utilizing your chicken waste and you have chickens, have you had any issues with predators? Do you have bear issues, owls, or eagles?
No, these chickens were a gift from a neighbor. Ironically, in the same subdivision, which is why I was clueless that I probably shouldn't have them. Had them 3 weeks. We were not ready for chickens because I had just bought the house, and we had
about the hawk story.
we had a hawk come through the backyard because I hadn't fenced them all the way off yet. So that's how we got Miss Survivor. I didn't lose any chickens, but yeah, that was the day that we started fencing, because when someone gifts you an animal you're not prepared for, you're not always set up to appropriately house.
Survivor was a smart chicken. He went under the deck.
Yes. Now we have a concrete footer, 2x4s, treated posts, sun-tough roof, and double wire. Like, I'm ready. I'm even ready to hang hot wire should I need to add an additional buffer zone.
Awesome. Thank you. And to your daughter, I know those hawks can be kind of scary with the birds. That's how I inherited some chickens and a turkey with somebody's owls, and the hawks were getting in their coop. So it can be scary.
It can be a little scary.
Thank you.
Any further questions of Ms. Kennedy? I do have a question. It's pretty knowledgeable and you have experience here. Is that so? You have electricity? You run power to your coop to have lighting and heating and
do.
that sort of thing? Okay.
I try to be conservative. They sell a little freeze block that essentially does not turn on until it hits below freezing, and then a light will come on to add a little bit of heat, and it turns off, I think, at 45. And then when we hit the sub-zero temperatures, it usually can't keep up. Then there's a backup little tiny space heater I pop in there that I set at 60 that will keep the coop annoyingly climate controlled. They've got big feather coats on, and I'm heating chickens. Try not to do it a lot, but if the water's not frozen, the chickens are happy.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Appreciate your testimony.
Ready?
Is there anybody else in chamber that would like to speak to ordinance 3332-2023? Seeing no other testimony in chambers here, we'll go to Zoom. Ms. Sainer?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. For our Zoom attendees, if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. At this time, we have one hand raised. Miranda, if you could unmute yourself by pressing *6, state your last name and whether you're a resident of the city or not.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Miranda Martin, and I live within the Woodland subdivision, within city limits. All right. Our household resides within the Woodland subdivision, as I mentioned. We are homeowners, and I just like to state before I get started that in comparison to a wide variety of living conditions, it's not actually that crowded, as was previously mentioned. Crowded is subjective. It's not fact. If you have never had a yard smaller than 1/10 of an acre, of course the lot sizes can be considered small and crowded. However, that does not apply to many people. The lot sizes not only can easily sustain a dozen small animals, like chickens, but they can even grow substantial food gardens. Space is not a feasible issue. I feel this distinction is important based on previous testimony regarding chickens within our neighborhoods. I'd like to mention that In our multi-generational household of 10 people, we support the allowance of keeping live chickens on residential property. The importance of a continuous and sustainable food source is more critical now than ever. Providing basic sustenance for a family has become especially difficult when relying solely on just purchased food. And don't get me started on the supply chains. We aren't asking to slaughter chickens on a residential property. We are asking to peacefully raise chickens with love and attention as to harvest their eggs. Eggs to feed our children in the many forms possible. French toast on the weekend, scrambled eggs for my toddler, extra protein in pancakes, everything. It's easy for members of the community that have had the means to make a significant purchase of large pieces of land outside of city limits to offer that as a solution to need to raise chickens. However, for the general public, such expectations aren't realistic. Chickens won't serve the community members that don't have any financial concerns. This is not who the ordinance pertains to. As such, perhaps their opinions should be considered lightly. Opinions on a matter that does not, in fact, negatively affect them in the least. It is probably a safe assumption that these community members who have spoken previously have never really had to worry about where they or their children were going to get their nourishment from, or at least they don't currently. The eggs provided by the chickens will offer a critical protein source for growing children and adults alike when other proteins like meats cannot be purchased in the bulk needed that would adequately nourish a family. When all things are considered, basic physiological needs of our children should not be overshadowed by entitled community members who have full bellies, thick wallets, and no young children to feed. That's my statement. Thank you for hearing me, and I hope you consider what we've said.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Martin? Thank you, Ms. Martin, for your testimony. Madam Clerk?
I appreciate you hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Shelby Fuller, you can press *6 to unmute yourself if you're calling from a phone. Please state your name and whether you're a resident of the city or not.
Hello, I am Shelby Fuller. I'm a homeowner on First Street here in Kenai, so I am within residence. And as we've heard from other members here and our previous community member before me, the positivities of owning chickens within our available land. I believe there are already guidelines set in place, written in for the number of chickens, the housing requirements for them, and those are more than adequate. And we've even heard testimony on several changes possibly made, including permits or minimizing the size of chickens that would suffice as well to owning them. In my experience, cats have been more of a nuisance than the possible owning of chickens. Just last summer, I had a horde of +8 cats and 4 dogs that neither of which were my animals, continually came across my yard and damaged my property and household. Regardless how many times I reported it to animal control and trapped animals and bringing them to the pound, they kept returning. There is a stricter guideline set in place for housing and maintaining these chickens. Additionally, as already stated, the eggs are priceless, especially for families with kids. I myself have a young kid. The ability to raise chickens besides for food alone is wonderful, but what it teaches my child, the responsibility, the love and care, and the self-sustainability. Not only do chickens provide us eggs, but the fertilizers as well. So now we can have bigger gardens. I can produce more produce for my family. And in terms of my family, we have a smaller household of only 3. So 4 to 6 chickens would provide us more than enough eggs. And those extra eggs, we're not looking for profit. Those are going to go to my other community members here to feed their families as well. And I can tell you, most families down here, especially young families with children, do not have the budget to buy healthy, sustaining food for their families and their kids, keeping going. While these ordinances may have worked in the past, back in the 80s, this is 2023. This is not 1980. The civilization and the food supply chain we have now is not the same. so we should not be having to live under the same rules as we did in the 80s. And like I say, we've heard plenty of testimony as to prove why this is not a bad thing. It is very feasible to have and would be more of a positive for our community as a whole to come through and support everyone and start living as a community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Fuller? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony, Ms. Fuller.
Next, we have the individual with the phone number ending with 2114. Press *6 to unmute yourself, and please state your name and whether you're a resident or not.
Was it *6 or *9?
Hello, my name is Jennifer Dunbar, and I live on Ash Avenue in Kenai. I am a homeowner, and it was very great to hear everybody's opinions and viewpoints. I think there's some really good conversation and thoughts going on. I have a household of 6, 4 kids and 2 adults, and I can tell you that between the price of eggs and the shipping and being able to get food up here has been really hard lately. I think that's been very evident in the community. And I am for the proposition this evening to make it at least allowable for people to be able to provide food for themselves. I don't have a big, long speech, and I haven't done a ton of research. I'm not planning on getting chickens as soon as this is passed and, you know, load up my neighbors with a bunch of chickens. I don't have the coop. I don't have the stuff set up yet. But just to be able to have the option, provided that times get tough enough where I would need to provide for my family, would be a freedom. And that's all I have to say.
Any questions for Ms. Dunbar? Thank you, Ms. Dunbar, for your testimony.
There are currently no additional hands raised through Zoom.
If there's anybody else on Zoom that would like to testify, please raise your hand so you can be recognized. Okay, take that as no testimony. So with that, we will bring it back to council. Before we do that, I'd like to defer to the clerk. She has a
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel.
direction or guidance here for us.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. And I'd like to state that the reason I am giving you this information is because there may be a motion to postpone and refer back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So Robert Rules of Orders establishes that a motion for an amendment or the same motion given cannot be renewed in the same session. For the City Council, a session begins at your first meeting after certification and ends at your next meeting when it's adjourned after that certification. So your session starts November 1st. The first meeting in November ends at the last meeting in October. So the attorney and I sat down, and if there's a change in wording or circumstances sufficient to present substantially a new question, it may be renewed. However, the attorney and I feel that it's a very fine line, and if a motion made tonight were to fail, and the Planning Commission were to make a recommendation that is the same in substantial place as of that, you would not be able to make that motion again. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Senior. My only question would be the first one is which would be a technical amendments that shouldn't be in effect.
Yeah, those technicals are fixing references to the correct paragraphs because
Okay.
there was a renumbering of them. So those amendments would be very much appreciated.
Very
Or
good.
they could be made after it comes back from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, very good. Any questions? Vice Mayor Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. So maybe if this is the proper time to give a report, since I'm the liaison from Planning and Zoning, and just so the body knows whenever this starts, I do plan on taking their recommendation to postpone it. And if I'm hearing the clerk properly, is that if any of the things that we talk about up here now fail, and we take it back to a work session, they can't take action on those items. Is that how you're seeing it, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through the mayor, they may make those same recommendations, but because you guys have already made the motion, you would not be able to entertain them when it came back to the council.
Thank you.
Councilmember Axton?
Thank you, Mayor. I would be supportive of sending it back to planning and zoning, and that was their number one request, actually, during their last meeting. I was not here personally, but I was YouTubing and watching, and so I'll support that. And I do have some amendments that are published in here I wanted everyone to have an opportunity to see those, and that would not be my intent to move or discuss any of those tonight. However, the technical amendments recommended by the clerk, I think it would be appropriate to make those now. And I would be happy to make that motion.
I don't think, I mean, when we defer back, those are just technical, so I wouldn't be objecting that, but I would like to defer to one of the sponsors of the ordinance first, and then we'll kind of circle back to that, or to have them make that proposed amendment. Is there either of the sponsors that would like to lead off? Councilmember Dothett?
Sure. I guess I'll just talk about the ordinance, and then I'll convene about the other issue at hand for postponement and going back to P&Z and that. This ordinance was originally put out there before the more public presence of the egg shortage, and that wasn't the main push on this. This ordinance was originated right after I was, as one of my first ordinances to try to see how the system works, and I think it's an important ordinance for food security, just for Alaska in general. It's going to be a benefit for the community. I think there's a lot of positivity throughout the community for this, and a lot of people watching it to see how it comes about. There's a lot of different things that have come about during this. I've done my research quite a bit, had a lot of different talks and conversations. I don't feel that the 12 chickens is exorbitant. I think they're more than ample to be able to fit on a quarter-acre lot. Based on the research I've done, and I've brought some measurements that I could show, but essentially everything I've looked at is for 12 chickens, the recommended for USDA was about 12 by 15 feet of lot space, and that would include your coop can be elevated in that. That's the area. That easily fits just right in front of us here, and I'll lay that out if we want to have questions about that, but I don't see the argument of it not having enough room on a quarter-acre lot. I know there's been some concerns about that, and I think that when you look into it, it really doesn't take as much as some people feel. The chickens would be contained, that would be required. As far as animal nuisance laws and regulations, those are already in effect. There's a lot of people in the city that already have chickens, and if you had looked at during the planning and zoning, staff spoke to very few, if any, complaints in the last several years. And as far as having to have the issue that we brought up of having to register your chickens so that the animal control would know exactly where they're at, if there's no complaints, they're not going to go there anyway. If there were complaints about a dog, registered or not, that's where they're going to go. So having to have that so they would know where they're at isn't a viable idea for me, and that just adds more paperwork and more staffing time and issues for something that doesn't need to be addressed in that form. As far as how many chickens we need, it's going to be variable on what your needs are. 12 chickens is supplying a good amount of eggs. They don't all lay every day. There was some questions about that. Average chickens in their prime, depending on their species, what I was able to find is roughly 180 to 320 eggs per year. So they're not laying every single day, every single chicken. I do have some friends here locally that have a very fancy coop, and they heat it, and they do their light and everything else. And throughout the year, they say they average about 8 eggs if you were to average it out. It does go down in the winter. It goes up in the summer. They'd say they probably get about 8 eggs a day out of a dozen chickens. I know my family alone with 6 people in it, we could, if we had scrambled eggs with six of us, 4 boys in the family, they can do that in a dozen eggs for breakfast. So would we necessarily need 12 chickens? Maybe, may not, but we can also gift those to our families and spread the wealth if we needed to. But as far as the number of chickens per lot size, which I think it's acceptable, There are other variances. We're not the first community. The only community that I've heard was Wasilla. Well, Palmer allows chickens. Anchorage allows chickens. Anchorage allows chickens as long as 6,000 square feet. Fairbanks chickens are allowed. Juneau chickens are allowed. If you go down to a lot of populated areas in lower 48, one that I found was, a lot of people consider it our closest city to us is Seattle. They allow chickens. They allow quite a few chickens. They allow 8 chickens, and then one for the first 10,000 square feet, and then they stagger it up to allow a chicken for every 1,000 square feet after that. So they're looking for even more chickens than we have in a much higher populated area. Just some articles have been presented to me while we were here over the last month or so, some interesting stuff. You know, LA, New York, Sacramento, there's tons of cities much more populated than the little rural town of Kenai, Alaska, that are allowing chickens as people to have a food source. And I think it's important for us to move forward and not live in the past. I think there's a huge need, and I think the community is behind it. I would like to point out that every person that's come and talked against it lives in one very tight-knit community that had one bad egg that we resolved it. Pun intended, I guess, on that one. But it was a situation that somebody went outside their permit, and they had way too many chickens. And through council practices and the city regulations as they are now, it's been resolved. And those bad instances, there's ability to have it resolved. And I don't want that one instance to ruin the possibility for everybody to have the right to have chickens in the city, to set a bad taste in everybody's mouth. There's going to be bad eggs out there, so to speak, but we have the ability to regulate those in-house right now without overcomplicating the ordinance as it's written already. That's my brief overview. I know there's a lot more that I wanted to talk about, and I can bring some sort of stuff more up as we go. As far as referring it back to P&Z, I'm not in favor of that. And if we look back at P&Z, they said and/or council. P&Z to me was pretty grossly underprepared for the ordinance. They didn't do a lot of research, it didn't seem like. And it was like they were caught off guard by it completely. They had time, they could have done more research themselves. We sent it to them. They did come back with a recommendation for setting behind the buildings, which also been an amendment. I agree with that. As far as having a work session, I would not agree to go back. We're gonna, there's some time sensitivity with allowing this to move forward. If people want to be able to have chickens this summer, they're gonna run out of supply real quick on being able to have them. So as far as delaying it back to P&Z and then possibly coming back to us, I don't agree with that. I think we can handle this with a lot of what we have now in-house. Right here, we're elected officials, and we can hash out, and I feel that very strongly that we should be able to get a good ordinance out of what we have and the opinions that we have here in front of us with the amendments, and let this move forward without stalling the process unnecessarily. So that's where I'm at.
Councilmember Ware.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I, too, as a co-sponsor, want to add to what Alex has said. You know, I spoke with both Kenai Feed and Cadbury Feed, and the importance of this is simply to get orders in for the spring chick orders. Their supply, they order these with their suppliers in December of what they believe they'll go through. And so some of the more popular species of chickens have already sold out. Somebody just beginning is not going to care what type of species that they get. They're just going to start with the basic chickens. And they stated that, you know, even at that, they sell out, they'll get them weekly. And that's the urgency in this and getting it passed, is so that people have time to get their orders in, time to place those orders, and so that ultimately the distributors can fill those orders. Kenai Feed was aware of this ordinance coming forth, Cadbury Feed was not. Some of the questions that we asked them was, why should we be doing this now? And that was their answer: to place the orders before we run out of select species. Kenai Feed, which is located on Key Beach, if you're not familiar, they offer your choice of getting your chicks. You can get your feed, you can get coops from them, and they also have electric fence, and they encourage people to put in electric fences. Cadbury feed, you can order your chickens, you can get your feed, and they will be ordering some electric fence. They do not offer coop supplies. So from their point of view, it's urgent to get these orders in so that they can keep getting provided back from their suppliers. They lock these orders in December. So if we postpone this, we're looking at postponing this ultimately almost into March. And as most people know, we're picking up our spring chicks March, April. So that's going to hamper people's ability to get their chickens. As I spoke earlier from an OEM point of view, Office of Emergency Management, food security, I think, is something that we're all concerned about. And when you hear that we have a 72-hour supply of food, that should concern everybody. You know, in the end, what my neighbor does on their property is what my neighbor does. I don't get to say what they get to do and what they don't get to do. My grandparents built my house in 1954, first modern home in Kenai. When my grandparents built that house, they did not think there'd be farms all around them. We have farms. I have horses in my backyard. I have no problem with it. I have dogs, big dogs that are meant to protect us. We spend a lot of time in rural areas with bear encounters. My dogs, they bark at a horse. We have to control them. It's our job. We don't get to defend our dogs running out, defend our dogs attacking another animal, livestock, or anything. So I know we've heard some concerns from people on that. In the end, it's a personal responsibility. In the end, we all have a right for food security. I've heard a lot of talks about property value being affected. We don't have anything to prove that. We had numbers that were given by our administration that was counter to some of the testimony that we heard that only 6% of the land would be affected. So if I can have chickens, because my lot's an acre and a half, what would say that I can't just tell your neighbors, bring your chickens to me? I'll raise your chickens. And this is where the problem we're getting into. I have that happening in my neighborhood from people that have too small of lot size. So neighbors with bigger lot size are taking on their chickens. They want their chickens in their backyard. They want to care for it. One thing I've realized is people that when they have this, they're vested. They're going to take care of their animals. They wake up, they deal with it, they feed them, they water them, they clean them. They live there. I have a horse property in my backyard. They don't live there. They don't have to be responsible for the smells, the cleaning, their horses escaping. Nobody's there. They don't know. They have to be notified. So I think there's a little bit difference when somebody is required to live there and lives on the property. They maintain it. They clean it. They're going to care for the animal. If the animal's sick, they're going to care for it. I don't see people that are going to allow dead birds that could be possibly infected to stay in their coop or on their property. I would expect people would handle that properly and safely. I would not favor bringing this back to P&Z. I did watch a lot of the comments come back to personal comments is what I heard from commissioners. I don't want chickens by me. I don't want chickens by me. That to me does not warrant a work session just because individuals couldn't rule on something because it affects them. Now, everything affects everybody differently. And I don't feel that either any of us should sit up here and say yes or no. I think everybody has a right to food security, and I support this, and I do not support delaying this.
Before Councilmember Dothett,
Just real quick, I just wanted to add, I'm not saying I'm not willing to negotiate on this. I want to work together as a body to make this go forth. What I don't want to see is excessive delays. I don't feel that, I think we've done our due diligence by sending it to P&Z already. They had an opportunity, they had public cost opportunities, they had opportunities to do their research. They got it presented for them. They sent us a couple of items, a couple of recommendations. I think we could, a lot of that we can hash out in-house right now. At the very minimal, the only thing I could see is possibly either an executive session tonight where we just go in it, we hash out, write up some amendments, or we do a joint session one, because I don't want to see it turn into multiple back and forths. Okay, it goes to P&Z, now they have a work session, now we have a work session, and then it just excessively one, and that's why they specifically said and or. when the P and Z sent it to us, they said that they wanted to have a work and P and Z or council. So if we do a work session, the only one that I might be in favor of would be council work session, not back to P and Z.
Further discussion? Vice Mayor Basil.
Thank you. I appreciate both the sponsors on this. I'm still going to be a no vote on it as it sits right now, unless we take the recommendation and go back to the Planning and Zoning Committee. They struggled with this. Half the audience there disagreed with it. Half the audience here disagreed with it. We have more work to do. I think we can do it right. We can make some changes. They need to be part of the process, and they've asked to be part of the process. That's what I took from the meeting, and that's why I do have a postponement that I'm going to put up for vote. But I will vote no as it sits tonight.
Thank you. Further discussion?
I have a question for staff. Probably go for the attorney. Are we required to go to P and Z on this ordinance?
Mr. Bloom?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Dothit. So this ordinance is a change to Title III, not a change to Title 14. So changes to Title 14, we would be required to, our code puts the duty on the Planning and Zoning Commission to make recommendations. This is not Title 14. Even if it was, you've already sent it to P&Z, so there's not a legal duty to send it back to Planning and Zoning, though I certainly think this is closely related to what P&Z deals with because it does involve land use.
So for clarification, we didn't have to send it to them the first time. We did, as token to say, let's see your opinion. We could, as a body, vote on this or go before our own work session without going back to P and Z, correct?
Sure. So the simple answer is you certainly are not you're not legally obligated to send it back to P&Z right now.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Councilmember Sonar.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I would very much like to support this going forward. I think it's important that families can provide eggs as part of their food source for their families. I do see the necessity of it, and I want to support this. The way it's written now is too broad. There's too many questions. The research I've read for 12 chickens would oversupply most families, and I would hate to see any commercial side business come out of this from having 12 chickens for a family of 3 or a family of 4. There needs to be some more work done on this. I'm willing to do a council work session. I am willing to send it back to P&Z because I think it would be valuable to have more input on this. If this is a city code that hasn't been changed, I think somebody mentioned 1980, we're looking at a significant change. And maybe the opportunity does need to get out there for more people to put their opinions in on how to do this. Because if it's worth doing, and I truly believe it is, I would like to see some kind of chicken ordinance to go forward. But if it's worth doing right. And even if it just means another 10 days or another 14 days, let's get it done right instead of trying to rush it through tonight. And then down the road, sorry, I have to do the pun, we end up with egg on our face. Sorry, I'm a punster. But as it stands right now, this ordinance is for me, is too broad. And I want to support it. I want to vote for something that will allow this. But the way it's written tonight is too broad. It needs sideboards, and to me, it needs a little bit more work done. I don't think it needs to go volleyballing back and forth for 3 or 4 months. I think just one more work session, even if it could be a joint one or something, just one more work session, let's hash out some details and put some sideboards on this and have something to move forward that all of us can live with. Because if I choose to have chickens and keep them and raise them, my neighbors should not be inconvenienced. They probably shouldn't even know I have chickens. And I just want to make sure that the people that want to raise chickens get the opportunity to do so. And the neighbors that don't want anything to do with chickens, I want them to have some protection also. So I'm advocating just a little more work on this. And as much as I want to vote for yes for this tonight, it's too broad, and if it goes forward the way it's presented, my vote will be no.
I'll come back to you. You've already spoke several times, Mr. Doth, and I'll come back to you here in a minute. Councilman Raskin.
So I've raised chickens all my life. I have a 40,000 square foot lot. I have 12 chickens now. Most of my neighbors don't know I have them. I'm in favor of us having a chicken ordinance of some sort, but I'm not in favor of this one for all of the reasons that Councilmember Sonart and Baisden and Naxted have stated. I too agree that it's too broad. We need to limit it for the size of the lots. We need to establish some parameters for structure. So, you know, we say we want a semi-permanent structure or permanent structure, and some people may consider that pallets with a tarp on top, and that's not what I would consider an adequate housing or even the proper kind of housing to have for a subdivision. So going forward, I am very much in favor of this going back to planning and zoning and us addressing the issues that have been brought forth by our citizens and coming up with a compromise. As it's written now, I too will vote no.
Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you. First, I wanted to recognize Gary Greenberg that's in here, and he's one of our planners that I do believe was quite prepared, by the way. So I appreciate what you guys do. And but you were the one that made the motion to send it here. And when watching this from my living room, the commission went through and they discussed and they stated whether or not they were going to vote for it or against it. And in reading, though I can't tell you how everybody in the end was going to vote, it seemed that it was going to be voted down, was my opinion. And but then at the end it changed, and you asked the council to let it come back. Then so you voted in the positive, which I concur with, but it was kind of contingent upon it coming back to you as your body so you could do some more work. And I feel that that's something, since you did vote for it and that was the condition, I think that would make it an appropriate reason to send back to you, even though we don't need to. So I'll be, again, I'll be supporting that for just because I think it's the right thing to do based on your motion.
Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Can I request an Addie's?
Yeah, how much time do you need?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay. Go back on the record. Further discussion. Councilman Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. After talking with staff, we would like to make a motion to move this to a joint work session with Planning and Zoning at their next meeting, Wednesday, the 8th.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Do you have a time?
We didn't get a time. 7 is their normal.
5 p.m.?
That would be up to the body, but yeah, 5 p.m. would.
Just to get input from staff. I heard 7, I heard 5. Sounds like allocate 2 hours just for information before we vote. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Typically, P&Z work session starts at 5:30. Our normal public hearing typically starts at 7. Just to be consistent how we've held work sessions, I think it should be held at 5:30 next Wednesday at 8th, on the 8th.
And for clarification, that gives you enough time for public notice. Okay. Let's move to second discussion on the motion. Councilmember Nexton.
On the surface, at this point, I would not concur with us having a joint work session with them. I feel that having the two groups together, we tend to, council might tend to dominate that meeting. And it's really this, actually the same logic why I didn't come here during the planning and zoning meeting, because I didn't want to be back there and influence them in any way. I zoomed in and they were unaware, and I want them to do their planning and zoning, their good work that they do. And I think without influence of city council there is the best way to allow them to do their work.
Further discussion? Councilmember Dothett.
Just on that note, I think working together with them in one aspect in the meeting counteracts basically that aspect. I think all of us in one room, we're all trying to do a common goal of getting this written correctly. And I believe doing a joint work session, so we don't have to have possibly more work sessions with just council on their own, eliminates that whole need, and it gives everybody in one room to hash everything out, write a quality ordinance, do the changes that we want to do, and modify it one time, come back, and then it's just, when we get our recommendation, we'll have already had part of it. We've had some opinions in there, our views or with their views, and it would all be in one. And that's why I think there should be quality discussion between both P&Z and commissioners in an open environment, all at the same time, working together like we should to get it all hashed out at one time, one and done. And then by the time it comes back to us at our next meeting, it's already done, and we don't have to hash it out further up here. That's my opinion.
Councilman Warrior.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I really wanted to move forward on this, and so working with what the body has said, that they wanted a work session, we talked over doing a joint work session due to a lack of agenda items for P&Z. Their meeting could be canceled, so I think this is a great time to be able to work together. I know personally in my schedule and in my life, my husband's gone, I've got 3 kids in competitive sports, and doing a bunch of additional work sessions right now for my schedule is going to be very difficult. And as a co-sponsor, doing a joint work session on the 8th definitely works. This body, what we heard was we want a work session or we can't support this. And now I'm hearing we don't want a joint work session. So I'm a little confused as far as what this body is wanting. I thought we were coming forward to work together on this. I'll support a joint work session, but I'm just a little confused on why I'm hearing comments now that we don't want a work session jointly.
Vice Mayor Baislin.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, I'm going to work on the advice that I heard from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the reason why I'm supporting a work session for planning and zoning and not with the council is that, again, I want them to bring the public in, make the comments, and bring it back to us to where they get to work on this. And we we don't dominate the conversation as they're working on it. I think they can do great work for us. They have in the past. We'll depend on them for these recommendations, and I think we'll get a good product out of it. And that'll be my motion if this one doesn't pass. I'll also be putting forward a postponement that it goes back just for the planning and zoning to have a work session with the public when we get done.
Further discussion? So the motion before us is to do a joint work session. And clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Baisden?
No.
Mayor Gabriel?
No.
Councilmember Dothett?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted?
No.
Councilmember Askin?
No.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
You have 3 yes and 4 no votes. The motion did not pass.
Vice Mayor Baisden.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move to postpone ordinance number 3332, 2023 until March 15th, 2023. Refer the ordinance to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the purpose of conducting a Planning and Zoning Commission work session and schedule a second City Council public hearing on ordinance 3332, 23 on our March 15th, 2023 meeting.
I'll second that.
Probably a question for legal. I mean, should we give an element of direction here for the planning and zoning, or I know there's proposed amendments. I think we're getting kind of close here from what I'm hearing with Ms. Kennedy and Mr. Canetta. We're all kind of saying there's compromises out there in the community, but just maybe you could weigh in.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I think what we would need to know as administration was just if council or the Planning and Zoning Commission wanted us to bring any additional information that we haven't already brought forward.
I have one.
Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I can't support this. I will not be as a co-sponsor to this ordinance. I am not going to be at the March 15th meeting. I am not able to even telephonically come into that meeting. So I will be absent and out of state for that meeting. And as a co-sponsor, I think it would be important to make sure both of us would be available for that. So the March 15th doesn't work for me.
Councilmember Dothett.
My question is why March 15th? Don't we have another meeting coming before this body on the February 15th?
Well, we would have one, Ms. Sainer.
Thank you. For clarification, the March 15th meeting was brought because if the commission has a work session, they cannot make any recommendations in a work session. No actions can be taken. So they would have to take those actions up at their next meeting, which that would fall on the 22nd. And then if they, on the 22nd, it could potentially meet March 1st, but we're cutting it time. That date was picked to give the commission enough time to have a work session, potentially additional if they needed, and time to make a motion at a regular meeting that's publicly noticed.
So just for clarification, they're not having, planning and zoning's not having a meeting, and they would not have a work session on the 8th. So they couldn't, even if they had a work session on the 8th with a regular scheduled meeting, they wouldn't be able to use that as just an excuse, just the only item on their agenda for a meeting on the 8th?
They potentially could. We were making sure that we gave them sufficient time when we picked those dates.
So just for clarification, they could in theory have the work session on the 8th like we had discussed previously, and then they could vote on moving it forward on that meeting. And then in theory, we would then be able to have our decision on that on February 15th, correct?
We also have a meeting, the first meeting in March. Is that a possibility?
Yes, we do. We have a March 1st meeting as well.
Would that give them enough time if we amended the motion to the first meeting in March?
I believe it would. I would like the input from the planning director, Mitchell.
Ms. Mitchell? Hate to put you on the spot.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to be just honest with where I'm at within administration. I am a staff of 1 right now. My capacity I could probably do it, but at the expense of my own insanity. So I would prefer that if you can give staff additional time to really do a productive work session with the commissioners.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Appreciate that. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to circle back to a question that was asked, and I think Mr. Bloom was answering. He asked what additional information might be. He wanted to know what we should be providing to planning and zoning, and it would seem like all the public comments that are in our packet, and including, I guess, any written amendments that we have, that sort of thing. I'm not sure if there's anything else we can provide them in addition, but is that what you were looking for, Mr. Bloom?
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Naxted. Yeah, I just want to make sure if there's information that either this council or the commission wants in order to help them make a decision and have a productive work session, that we're prepared to provide that information to them. So if it's just the material in this packet, that's fine. I just didn't know if there was any additional information that anybody wanted that administration could provide.
Councilmember Dothett.
I would move if we can move that date from the 15th of March to the 1st, that would be good, because that's spring break, so I will be out of town in the lower 48. That's actually the day I'll be traveling, so I will not be able to make that 15th meeting either. The 1st would be right before I left, so I believe I believe I can make the 1st, but the 15th I know I can't make. Yes, I can definitely make the 1st, sorry, but the 15th I wouldn't be able to make either.
Councilmember Winger.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the date to March 1st and not March 15th.
I'd second that.
Question on the amendment.
As I stated, I will be gone traveling. As Alex stated, he will be gone traveling. We are both sponsors of this legislation. It really does a disservice if we exclude either one of us from this action. I'll be traveling as well, and I know my phone does not work to save my life in SeaTac. So the 15th, just because of travel, doesn't work.
Vice Mayor Basil.
Thank you, Mayor. And if appropriate, when we have the work session, the sponsors, is it okay for the sponsors to be there for the work session? Maybe this is for the clerk.
Ms. Sanders.
The council policy is written as 1 sponsor, and that is to ensure that there's not influence from the council that's directing the opinions that are coming from the Planning Commission.
If the other sponsor wanted to be there where I'm the liaison, could I back out as a liaison and let them be the liaison then, so they can stay in the body too? Would that be appropriate?
I think that should be done by a motion of council.
Okay.
So the amendment to the main motion is to amend the main motion to from March 15th to March 1st. Further discussion? Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back to our planner back there, and I think I heard the term sanity, and she's a person of a department of 1, and I guess I need a better understanding of your ability to meet that March 1st date or not. A little more in depth there so I can understand.
Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel and Councilmember Nexted. So, just what you answered to Mr. Bloom of what additional information, it doesn't sound like you're asking a lot of staff to bring to the work session other than what's already been included in the materials. So I do not see that as substantially adding too much where I cannot meet the 22nd when commission makes an action for recommendation. So we can hold the work session on the 8th, and then the following meeting, the 22nd, staff can plan to do an action recommendation for council. So March 1st could be doable.
Appreciate that, Ms. Mitchell.
Question.
Councilmember
if they are going to be making their motion on the 22nd, would it be better to do the work session on the 22nd prior to that meeting?
Ms. Mitchell?
It probably would be better. I don't, to be honest with you. It just gives staff more time based on the work session to maybe bring more to the, when they actually have the public, or not public hearing, a meeting to discuss further. Because I don't want to hold a work session and then things arise and I may not have answers to provide. That gives staff a little bit time to be presenting to the commission more information that might be presented at a work session. So that's where I see the plus in not having it on the same day, since this appears to be confusing, or a lot of clarification needs to be addressed. So I would like the additional time.
I would propose this. The amendment to the motion is to make our meeting to consider it March 1st, and I think we should just let administration figure out the times and dates that works best for them to work that through the Planning and Zoning Commission. So I don't think we really need to, maybe dictate what their schedule is for that. Does that make sense? So the motion, any further discussion on the motion to amend from March 15th to March 1st? Seeing no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Dothit?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baisden?
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. The motion to postpone to March 1st is approved. We are back to the original motion to schedule the public hearing.
And do we need to add anything to the motion regarding direction, Mr. Bloom? Or do you think there's enough information there?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I think there's enough information, just so everybody's clear. The motion and desire of council is to send it back to P&Z to have a work session and make any recommendations in time for council to consider those recommendations from the work session at the March 1st meeting. So I think if that's the case, then I think it's sufficient.
Councilmember Naxted?
I guess I have a question of the maker of the motion. Just the intent of the meeting, if it's just for a closed work session, or if there's going to be public input, testimony involved or not.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted, and sorry, I'm not the maker of the motion, but I will tell the body that anytime we hold a public meeting, we open it up for public comment prior to the work session. So the public can provide any testimony, but they wouldn't be a part of the roundtable conversation between the commission members. If you wanted more of a give and take, there's other things that are available, such as like a town hall meeting or something like that. But at a work session, there's certainly opportunity for the public to provide input during that meeting.
So we're back to the main motion to defer. Further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Dothit?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonart?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baisden?
Yes.
And Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. The motion to postpone to March 1st, refer to the Planning and Zoning Commission for a public hearing, and schedule a second public hearing before council on March 1st is approved.
Thank you. Next up, we have item D2, ordinance number 3333-2023, amending Kenai Municipal Code 8.05.010, adoption of fire prevention standards, and repealing and replacing Kenai Municipal Code 8.05.030, local amendments to the 2009 International Fire Code to adopt the 2021 International Fire Code with local amendments. Pleasure, council. Councilman Raskin.
I move that we enact ordinance 3333-2023, adoption of fire prevention standards to the 2021 International Fire Code.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3333-2023? Do we have anybody online?
There are no hands raised online, Mayor Gabriel.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll bring it back to council. I know we have Mr. Curtin and Mr. Hendrickson in the audience with us to, I think, through administration, help answer questions. So I'll open up for debate or deliberation. Vice Mayor Bazin.
Thank you, Mayor. So through the administration, and you left out the fire marshal, he's been back there quiet.
Oh, sorry, Tony.
I just seen him back there. He didn't realize he was going to be here all night. Maybe just an overview from somebody from the administration on this would be fine. Or I could speak to it if you needed me to.
Mr. Eubank, do you want to defer to one of your staff, or go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Vice Mayor Bazin, I will defer to staff. I just want to throw a couple of things out there real quick on the ordinance and point out it is moving from the 2009 code to the 2021 code. I think of keynote is that the local amendments that are included under the 2009 code and the 2021 code are the same. We did not propose any new local amendments, and none were eliminated. And then I would defer to Jeremy to talk about more specifics if council has those.
Thank you, council. As was mentioned, we are jumping quite a few years from 2009 to 2021. The changes, though, are mostly just upgrades in technologies, processes. Things have moved around. The state used to have 71 amendments to the fire code. They've actually reduced the amount of amendments that are in the fire codes. Some of those are due just to items being actually added into the code that weren't in the code before. But for the most part, yes, there are changes, but I don't think there are significant changes in the fire code. We used to copy and paste the state's amendments and write them into the Kenai Municipal Code. This year we're doing it a little different. We're adopting the fire code as adopted by the state law, which kind of cleans up our end. A lot of the amendments that are specific to the city are through the building side, on the building code. My code is mostly a maintenance code where I'm enforcing codes after a building is built. So most of what I do follows state law anyways. So the amendments aren't drastically different than what the state has. Where the amendments might be different are on the building side, but that's when a building is being built. I go in after the fact to make sure that buildings are being maintained as they were built to the code that they were built under. There is one change that is specific to the city of Kenai that is in the fire code, and that is just the very first one as far as permits. We don't have permitting inside the city. The state deletes the permitting. I'm adding just the wording of plan review and inspection just to give me that ability to, if somebody's doing a process inside of the city, it gives me the ability to kind of bring those individuals to the fire code official to kind of review a process or a specific permit that's in the fire code. Before I kind of would only see that after the fact as I was doing an inspection. So that is the only amendment that is specific to the city of Kenai, beyond administrative and enforcement type stuff that's been written into Kenai Municipal Code before. Other than that, like I said, most of the changes are minor and not significant changes. That's not to say that there aren't changes, and I couldn't tell you exactly all of the changes from 2009 to 2021, but they are just small here and there items.
Further discussion? Councilman Axton.
Thanks. I didn't read the electrical code. I'm a civil engineer, but don't have a real issue with it. I just want to, and I think you sort of answered it. The building, it says in the memo, the building official and the fire marshal coordinated efforts. Were you in agreement?
Yes, Councilman.
So you were
Maxted.
both in agreement, so thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I'm frankly, I'm just trying to look through it. Maybe I didn't do my homework. But when would this take effect within our city?
I believe it was March 3rd.
Okay. Good. Vice Mayor Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. If I can, maybe through the city manager, the state has adopted this. And do you know when they adopted, just off the top of your head?
Yes, the state adopted this. It went into effect October 28th.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Sonart,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxted,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baisden,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Dothett.
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance 3333, 2023 is enacted.
Thank you. Next up, we have item D3, ordinance number 3334-2023.
Hey, Mayor. Oh, excuse me.
Can we have a brief at ICE?
Sure.
Thank you.
What, 5 minutes? Okay. Back on the record. Council on item D3, ordinance number 3334-2023, amending Kenai Municipal Code Title IV Uniform Codes to adopt the 2021 editions of the International Building Code, International Residential Code, International Mechanical Code, International Fuel Gas Code, Uniform Plumbing Code, International Existing Building Code, International Property Maintenance Code, and the 2020 National Electrical Code, and incorporate local amendments. Pleasure of council. Vice Mayor Basin.
I move to adopt ordinance 3334, 2023.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3334-2023? Anybody online? Looks like our online crowd thinned a little bit, huh? No answers, okay. With that, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council. Vice Mayor Basin.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Maybe appropriate again, maybe to have our bill official give us an overview if the city manager wouldn't mind.
Mr. Eubank. I guess we'll refer to Mr. Curtin or Mr. Hendricks.
We'll pass it over here in just a second through the mayor. Thank you. So I would just like to say, as Fire Marshal Jeremy mentioned, the state recently adopted this full suite of codes in October. We're just bringing all of ours current. These are regularly updated on about a 3-year cycle. Every 3 years, this full suite gets modified by the ICC. And it's very appropriate. It's in our extremely in our best interest to go ahead and adopt these right now. The professionals that are doing this in the industry would far prefer we're on the newer codes than the older ones. It's actually much harder for them to work backwards than it is forwards. But with that, I'll pass it over to Don here. And anything else to add? And feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you. And yes, this code adoption basically takes our older codes that we previously had, cleans them up, coordinates them where they place in the current code books, and carries forward with everything that we had previously for the most part. Other than that, no major changes, nothing drastic.
Councilmember Dothan.
Just for the staff, did you have, I know the local home builders association sometimes will have recommendations or amendments they want to have. Did you have any meetings with the local home builders association about these adoptions and get their opinions on that recently, or no?
Yes, Councilman Dothett. Yes, I did have some phone conversations with the president of the local Kenai Builders Association. We had several discussions in regards to the codes as they were before and as they are going forward, and they were actually very supportive of all the changes that were prior and not changing.
Thank you.
Further questions? I do have one question. So as far as local amendments go, there isn't really any major changes from what we've had in place. And the reason I ask is if there were any changes that if somebody comes in to pull a permit, are they made aware of those updated local amendments or adoptions?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, they would be made. They would be made public, obviously with the codes that we have with Municipal Code Title IV. But yes, anybody that I've been verbally speaking to who's bringing in permits and whatnot, I've been letting them know that the plans to go forward would be to adopt the 21, and that after the March 3rd date, that would take effect. Any permits issued at this time until then would still continue under the 2009 and 2012 codes.
Very good. Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxted?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Baisden?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Dothett?
Yes.
Councilmember Sonard?
Yes.
You have 7 yes votes. Ordinance 3334, 2023 is enacted.
Thank you. And Mr. Eubank asked to be recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to take a second, council, and recognize Don. Don passed today his certified plans examiner exam. He will be a certified plans examiner now. So it's been a big accomplishment. It's been a load on his mind, and he's been working really hard. So I just wanted to recognize that.
Thank you. Next up, we have an item D4, resolution number 2023-04, authorizing a service contract and corresponding purchase order to Peninsula Refuge for fiscal year 2023 and fiscal year 2024 dumpster services for the wastewater plant. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-04, request unanimous consent.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2023-04? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2023-04 is adopted. And that brings us to item D5, resolution number 2023-05, adopting the city's capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. Pleasure of council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-05.
A second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to resolution number 2023-05? Okay. And there was a, before we get to, there was a proposed, there was, in our laydown, there was some language that was added, so I'll defer to Mr. Naxton to move an amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, in our laydown, there was some narrative amendments recommended. So I move that we accept the narrative corrections or additions that were provided, request unanimous consent.
A second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the revised languages amendment is adopted. Back to the main motion. Further discussion on the adopting of the city's capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2024-2028 is amended. Was there unanimous consent? Oh, sorry.
Request unanimous consent.
Okay, Councilmember, I see Councilmember Soner's got her light on. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I had an observation, which is going to lead to a question. Last year, when we were going through this plan, there was the possibility of putting lights on the Kenai Golf Course, not for golfing, but for the skiing. And it was bumped. It was, I think it was on the 2024 list or 2025 list. Anyway, it was deemed not high enough on the totem pole, and we bumped it back to like 28. I don't see it in here anywhere.
It was approved.
Oh, no.
Mr. Eubank.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Sonar, you know, every year this plan gets revetted and goes through the process again and goes through the commissions. I will tell you that the proposed project to provide lighting at for the ski trails last year was 100% dependent upon grant funding. I think we're still committed to that. It may not be in this actual plan, but I think that would be the case if some grant funds were identified and that it was able to be done with some other source besides city funds. But this plan does go through the same process every year, and it does change every year. I can't tell you exactly why that fell off. I didn't actually pick up on that myself, but I know that it's been vetted through all of the commissions and committees, and I'm not surprised if things do change. But that project itself was 100% grant funded and was only going to happen if those grant funds materialized.
I understand that. Thank you.
Further discussion? Vice Mayor Basin.
So thank you for the city manager. So maybe on that topic, if a council member wanted to bring something forward that fell off, they could always address that during the budget process?
Mr. Eubank.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Vice Mayor Basin. Absolutely. So, and what I want to make clear to council too is that, you know, the process that we go through in formulating this plan is it starts with department heads. They work through their various commissions and committees, and then we we bring this plan before council in a work session, and we bring it back here tonight. After this, if this plan is adopted, it is a tool that'll be used by the administration in preparation for the FY24 budget. It could include all the items that are in here. It could not include, and council has the opportunity to add or remove any of those items that would be included in the draft budget once it's transmitted to council. So you absolutely get another opportunity to look at these projects when you get to see how they financially fit into the city's plans, and you can add and remove and make amendments at that time.
Thank you.
Councilmember Dothan.
Just looking at this current, I guess I'm just a little confused on why, and maybe staff might be able to explain a little better. I'm just looking at the utility manager's truck of cost of $70,000 and the operator's truck of cost of $60,000. Why is there discrepancy in the, of $10,000 for what looks to be a truck that might be equipped with quite a bit of stuff? Is it just gonna be the niceties, or can they go to a work truck and they be similar? Or I'm just curious what the $10,000 difference in discrepancy would there be for?
Mr. Eubank.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Dothett. I would defer to Public Works Director. I suspect it has something to do with some implements that may be on the truck, different implements on the two different trucks. I don't think we're going to get air conditioning in one and a nice stereo in the other. I think it would probably be implements, but I would defer to Mr. Curtin. He probably can explain that.
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through City Manager Eubank. Yeah, just looking at these, they're different uses. So, you know, as you recall, we previously used to have two foremen, one for the water sewer side, one for the wastewater side. We now have one utility manager between the two. I do have the utility manager truck intended just as a regular half-ton crew cab truck, but mainly so he can take staff around as the case may be. The other vehicles, the less expensive one is likely the one we use for reading the meters. And it would be a single cab, not a crew cab. So it would be the difference between like an XL single cab versus an XLT crew cab. And there's other vehicles as you go further back. The actual mechanics trucks for going out and working on fire hydrants, for example, you'll notice some of those are in further years back, and the costs go up quite a bit depending on how those other vehicles are equipped as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Winger.
Thank you. I too have a question for Mr. Curtin. Just to follow up on these vehicles, is that my understanding that once they've hit their life with you, do they go to Parks and Rec, or do they go to another department to be utilized?
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you. Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger. So that is the case for certain vehicles within certain funds. I don't believe that is the case within the water and sewer fund, from what I recall. So I do believe in the general fund, for example, I believe the vehicles were intended to start with the police department and then on to streets department and then on to Parks and Rec. Because of the funding is different with the water and sewer, it's its own freestanding fund. That is not the case. Am I speaking correctly, Terry?
Mr. Eubank.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Curtin's correct. The fleet replacement plan that we utilize is for general fund funded vehicles only, and it's within that plan. We have identified certain departments that put a lot of miles on vehicles and some that put very little miles on vehicles, and there are plans for those departments to share. You'll notice that nowhere in any of the general fund capital plan are these types of vehicles because they're encompassed in the fleet replacement plan. Both the airport fund and the water and sewer fund purchase their vehicles separate from the fleet replacement plan, and they typically keep theirs for the life of the vehicle.
Thank you.
Further discussion on resolution 2023-05? Councilmember Naxton.
I'm in support of this, but I do have a request. I mean, all the commissions have reviewed you know, this plan, and it's come here. And my request would be that the clerk would send an email to all the commissioners, and either electronic copy of the plan or a link, you know, stating that it was approved by council, essentially, and here you can find it, so that they've got it in kind of a timely fashion, I suppose, if they care to look. And I request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2023-05 is adopted. That moves us down to commission committee reports. Council on Aging.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Council on Aging's February meeting for next Thursday, the 9th, has been canceled.
Thank you. Airport Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We will be meeting on February 9th.
Thank you. Harbor Commission.
We'll be meeting on the 6th, I believe, from my email, if I remember correctly. 5th or 6th? I'd have to look. 6th? Okay. A lot of dates in my head right now. And pretty light schedule, but hopefully we'll have some good conversation.
Very good. Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. Parks and Rec canceled its February 2nd meeting, and but the next meeting is scheduled for March 2nd.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor. The next meeting is February 8th at 7 p.m., along with the other issues that we've set them up for. Nothing to report.
Thank you. Beautification Committee.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Beautification Committee will meet here on February 21st.
Thank you. On the report of the mayor, I don't have a whole lot to report as the mayor. I just wanted to, as most of you have heard, my father passed away last, the beginning of January. And we were down, my wife and I had gone down to see our kids in Minnesota, and we were able to make it to Phoenix for a week to spend with him, which was planned. And unfortunately passed the day after we left. So I want to just say that I certainly appreciate the card and the condolences, and Mr. Bazin stepping in and filling in for me. And, you know, it's just sort of a tough time to work through. So I just like to thank everybody for that. I did attend the chamber luncheon today. Randy Ruaro, who used to be Governor Dunleavy's chief of staff, is now the executive director, and he gave an overview of the ADA program and what they're, you know, what they've got going right now for projects and things like that. One of the things that kind of jumped out at me, and I was going to have a follow up with Mr. Eubank about, was one of the things they'll do is they will step in and do funding shortfalls for federal projects if it's warranted or if it meets their conditions. So something that we might want to think about as we move along on the Bluff Erosion project, if that would be a qualifying project if, you know, things are become problematic on the funding. But it was a good report. And just so you know, Mr. Ruaro, who, like I said, he was the governor's chief of staff and was very helpful for us last year when Mr. Oster and I went down to Juneau. We tried to meet with the governor. He happened to be out of town, but he took a last minute meeting with us and was very helpful in moving that the $6.5 million that was in the proposed under the GEO bond package to the capital side. So we were able to get that funded, and so I was able to thank him for that today. So with that, that'll conclude my report. We'll go to administration report. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Got a few things to report on. One, I wanted to take just a minute, let you know kind of the progress of my transition into the city manager role. I've met with all department heads of the city. I think those conversations went well. The focus of those conversations really was where the department heads see their departments, where they have the vision for where their departments are going, and most importantly, how the city manager's office can support them in their job. That's really what the city manager's office is about, is supporting the department heads that are doing the day-to-day work. So I think those went well. I'm in the process now of meeting with all council members, and I've met with 3 so far. I look forward to meet the meetings with the others. Bluff erosion, I will start there. Last I spoke to the Corps, I believe it was about 3.5 weeks ago now, almost 4 weeks. They were a week to 10 days from having that 65% cost estimate. A week to 10 days, I think in Corps land must be about 5 to 6 weeks, because we're at 4 now and we still haven't seen it. I did speak with Mr. Curtin. Mr. Nackstead, you had a question last time about is this an independent cost estimate by the Corps, or are they in conjunction with our design team? And this one is an independent cost estimate being performed by the Corps on the 65% design document. There are likely to be potentially 2 more cost estimates along the way as the design nears completion. This is probably the more important of the ones that's going to take place, because this is the cost estimate that the participation agreement between the city and the Corps will be based and will be written upon, which basically means the Corps is going to pledge that they have their share of the funds, and we're going to pledge that we have our share of the funds, which will pave the road for this project to go to bid and later construction. So there will be other cost estimates, but this one is being done independently by the Corps. Next, I got a couple things I think this is the fun part of the job. I will tell you that the 2022 Kenai Police Officer of the Year is Mr. Chad Larson, and the 2022 Kenai Dispatcher of the Year is Michaela Durkavorkian. Those 2 individuals, those awards are done by their peers over at the police department and in the dispatch center, which I think makes it even more special. I'd just like to read you some of the comments that their peers said about these individuals. They work hard, they're proactive, they show empathy, professional, personable, patient, they try to help, they have a positive attitude, they're encouraging, they're approachable, they're knowledgeable, and they never talk down to people. And I just want to take a minute to say thank you to both of them. I think they exemplify good public service, and I think they exemplify the values of the city. So I think great job to those 2 individuals. In addition to that, there was a situation, I think it was last week, maybe it could have been the week before, we had here in the city. The departments over there, they call it a lifesaver nomination. It involved KFD B Shift, which includes Jesse Torianen, Steve Turkington, and Garrick Martin are all firefighters on that shift, Engineer Dustin Voss and Captain Scott Summers. It also involved KPD officers Hall, Larson, Asp, and Smith, Sergeant Coleman, and Lieutenant Langham. They had a situation where they had an elderly individual who's suffering from dementia, who had wandered away from their house. They immediately responded to the area. One of our officers was able to locate him. This gentleman had wandered off the road. He was about 50 feet out into the snow. And they took the time and they did their job. They got him back. He's safely at home with no injuries. And, I don't want to overplay it. It's all on a day's work for what they do, but I think it's commendable. And I know that the professionalism and everything that they put into it, and I think it just exemplifies, again, public service and represent the city very well. So I want to acknowledge that. Couple other things I will tell you. I'm going to hold my optimism in the future. I thought we had a really good candidate pool for replacement of the finance director position. That quickly evaporated, and the position has been reposted, and we're looking for more applicants. So. It closes now on February 10th, and hopefully we can keep moving forward with that. Our HR position is the other department head type position we have vacancy right now. It closed on January 27th. We're in the process of reviewing applicants, and we'll be scheduling interviews. The last item I'm going to update on is what's going on at the Alaska Regional Fire Training Center. As you all know, the contract, the city's contract with Beacon to operate that facility and provide ARF training to not only city personnel, but fire individuals from around the state, with mostly aviation focus, has been in question. We've had numerous meetings with the state. I'm confident to say I believe that we will be able to provide uninterrupted fire training over there this summer. I can't tell you exactly what form that's going to be right now. We're still massaging our way through that. But I think we're going to be able to provide that for the aviation community in Alaska without a significant burden on the city. The long-term solution over there is something else. It's something different I think we're going to work on, and we're going to continue down that path to ensure the success of that facility. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city manager? Councilmember Dalton?
Just a question. With the planning and zoning department, do we have that job? Is it set, the position that was available in that position, is that position still posted or is it closed? And are we having any luck with applicants on that position also?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Dothett. If Linda wouldn't mind responding, I don't know the status of that one per se.
Ms. Mitchell?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Dothett. So it is going to close this Friday, and I think I could say we have a very large pool of candidates. We're in the 15 candidates range as of this point, so.
That's outstanding, especially in this market.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Winger?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Thank you, Mr. Eubank, for your report. I just want to bring a little, I appreciate you bringing forth individuals that work and dedicate and do such a great job in our community. Just to kind of follow up on that, maybe since I see Chief Ross back there, I understand Kenai Police Department just did a training, a self-defense training with the Soldotna Police Department and the Homer Police Department, and I was just wondering if maybe we could get a little bit of an overview of what that partnership looked like.
Mr. Eubank? Chief Ross?
Through Mayor Gabriel, Councilperson Winger. So Homer Police has actually been doing this for a couple of years, and they have had an outline, and they had waivers, and they had it all set up, and they actually offered to come up here and assist. So that was kind of the impetus, and then the Soldotna Police and the troopers and us, all 4 agencies, went there. I think we had 150 ladies signed up for this women's self-defense class. They had to do a waiting list because they think they could only handle 115, and then there was a fair number of no-shows. So in the end, we probably could have gotten them all in. But they spent 5 hours over there learning different techniques on defending themselves, and it was really good interaction between law enforcement and some ladies, and giving them some techniques and some ideas for protection. It went very well.
Councilmember Winger?
Just to follow up, do you think that's something, because I was one of the people on the waiting list, I've been following Homer, do you think that it would be something that we would see again up in our area offered?
Chief Ross?
Councilor Winger, so there's some talk about doing it again in March. Whether we can get that together with everybody or not, I'm not certain. But yes, there is definitely interest in doing it again. I'm just not certain on the date.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and just the fact that everybody partnered together to offer that locally was amazing. I know that people had their high school daughters attend it with them as well, so really working our youth, so thank you.
Further questions of the city manager? Seeing none, I'd just like to say that it's, I've been missed the last couple of meetings. I know, Terry's transition from Paul, so I just wanted to say I look forward to working with him in the near future and moving the city forward. With that, we'll go to City Attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, members of council. I don't have anything to say, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the City Attorney? Seeing none, we'll move to the City Clerk, Ms. Sainer.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I have a few things for you tonight. One, I want to show you. I want to thank very much Gary Greenberg, our GIS technician, and Linda Mitchell for making this possible. We now have GIS mapping of our cemetery where we can track the new section and its uses. So as you can see, we have 2 reserved plots in there already and 1 occupied. This is currently only internal. We will take it to external after we've done a few more things to it, and this will allow Peninsula Memorial, when they're dealing with a family that lost a loved one on the weekend or evenings when we're not home, identifying a plot with that family without having to wait until we're in the office. So we're very excited that we're first step down. And then my next one is just a reminder, absentee voting for the Borough Mayor Special Election is ongoing here Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Election day is February 14th. Don't forget to vote. As all of you should have by now received an invitation from me about the appreciation and training lunch, I encourage everybody, all of you and our board and commission members to attend. We're going to show our appreciation for our volunteers on advisory boards and go into some really important training that a lot of you get the opportunity to do through AML conference, but our boards and commissions don't get these opportunity, and it's important that we share it with everybody. And been working on a policy review. We will be having a work session to go over all council adopted policies on the 15th, 3:30 to 5:30. Several of those policies are just bringing us up to date and aligned with our code and our agenda. So we will have those same items and resolutions for approval at that meeting following. And I'm available for questions.
Any questions of the city clerk? Seeing none, we'll move to additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public would like to address the council at this time? Ms. Nelson.
I'm very glad I don't have anything to do with chickens. For sure. Glad I didn't enter into make any comments at that portion of the meeting, too. I saw that and I thought, oh no, I'm not talking here. Later. So Marion Nelson, my home address is 44629 Tower Hill Street in Ridgeway. Just a brief summation of a couple of things. The back room that, as some of you recall more than others, was remodeled, a couple of years ago now already, and the grant that went into that has been very well utilized. We've had more workshops back there than we've had in the last, my God, 5 to 10 years, and the ones more recently have been very productive. We've had repeats on them and various ages, which is just exactly what people have been asking us for some years, and now we're able to actually do that, and more to come for sure. Very encouraging to the Art Center as well as to the people giving the workshops, obviously. But tomorrow night is, and today, the metal work and play show opened, and tomorrow night is the opening reception. And Councilman Douthat's son is going to be very happy when he walks in the door to see that, because it is loaded with metal of all kinds, all shapes and sizes, from huge to small, very precisely executed, precisely executed with different materials, much more casual. So it's really soup to nuts, but a lot of effort and a lot of interesting creations. Some very sophisticated, others not so much, but really, really interesting, from rather primitive or simple garden art to very complicated garden art, or complicated many things. I can't even go into that list at all. And one of the fun additions to this, we usually have music of some sort for the opening receptions, but it's usually, kind of quiet background music. That is not going to be the case this time. It will be kind of background music, but it's all metal. So we have Francis Jurek, Mark Jurek, on 2 trumpets. That's not quiet. Jeannie Duhan on her wonderful French horn that she's so great at. Kent Peterson on the trombone, and Cole Watkins on the tuba. So it's going to be, a little noisy in there. They're not going to play all evening long. And then with our newly polished cement floor, I don't know if you know what the term bright is when it has to do with music, but it's going to be brighter for sure. They'll probably want to, we were gonna put them in the front of the that room, the main gallery room near the front of the building now we're thinking about putting them in the, kind of the middle of the building in the gift gallery, just because it's gonna be some noise and it's not gonna be all the time. They'll be off and on, but it'll just make that reception tomorrow night just that much more fun. And it's gonna be fun walking around. And Alex Ridlinsky, our executive director, usually spends the better part of 2 days hanging a show, putting a show in, and he is really, really good at it. He just finished this afternoon. This has been 3 full days of messing with this stuff. This is not the usual hanging or just placing. No, it's just been a whole lot of work, but it's interesting. You have no idea how many people would respond to this call, open call for the show, as well as my phone calling a lot of people, but it's, we may do it again in the future. Any questions? I was glad to hear about the ordinances regarding code work, since we do have, we are going to be submitting a grant request to Rasmussen, and especially since Mike Navarre is still on their board, still chair of the grants committee, so, we really need to do that for all the things that need to happen to that building. It'll be extensive. It's kind of a headache, but it's our time to do it if we're ever going to. Any questions from
Thank you.
anybody?
Any questions for Ms. Nelson?
Alex, you must have one.
No, it's just a pleasure to always hear from you. You always are so much joy and it comes out in your voice about what you do over there, and it's great to hear you.
Well, now that you're crying.
Councilmember Doxted.
You knew how much I hated it. You'd never do that.
Better not.
Okay. Thank you, Marion. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else from the general public that'd like to address the council at this time? Nobody online, nobody here. With that, we'll move to council comments. Councilmember Dothett.
Thank you for all the work we're doing on this ordinance. I think it's going to be great, and it's all said and done. As far as a few things going on with the chamber, we're still looking for a couple positions and would love to get some more quality applicants in there, and we're doing everything we can, but as everybody seems to be in this time and day, just getting those applicants is getting more and more difficult lately, and hopefully we're going to close the position. I think it's set to close this week, and we'll see what happens and kind of reevaluate from there and what we're going to do with that at the chamber. We do have a couple of joint luncheons coming up, a real important one with the mayoral election coming up. It's a joint one over in Soldotna. I highly recommend anybody that can attend that one. I think it'll be good to hear everybody's opinions on what they have plans for the borough. And then other than that, I'm looking forward to spring break already.
Thank you. Councilmember Sonart.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to thank everybody who gave testimony tonight, whether it's in person or through letters or on Zoom. I think it was a good discussion. Hopefully not too many feathers got ruffled, and we'll move on. Stay safe and stay warm. Good night.
Thank you. Councilmember Askin.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I want to congratulate again Officer Larson and Dispatcher Dirk Kevorkian. Also, Dawn, on passing your inspection course. Great chicken discussion. I look forward to good recommendations from planning. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Winger.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I had it on my notes to kudo Kenai Police Department for the Joint Defense Course. Again, something I'm looking forward to hopefully getting through, not on a waiting list, to do hopefully the next local course. Would like to remind people that there is the Adopt a Fire Hydrant program. They can apply to adopt a hydrant in their neighborhood or around the community. They could apply for that through Parks and Recs. Wanted to remind everybody, as I made a promise to some of the seniors that came to me about continually reminding this body about the Meals on Wheels function. It's a Kentucky Derby theme, and it's March 31st. So plan your donations, plan to come. It's always a great event, supports our local seniors. And just wanted to remind people on moose caution. I know specifically in my neighborhood, we've got 3 aggressive moose. One yearling's aggressive, stomping people, kicking animals. We have a lot of people that walk through our neighborhood, and I had to stop and escort people past 2 moose twice today by the cemetery. One of the mooses for Shirley is being fed, so I just would like to remind people not to feed the moose. Be cautious. The moose are aggressive. They're struggling, so just a word of wise for anybody that's out walking or with their dogs. Those moose might look like they're a block and a half away, and they clear some space really fast. So just be cautious of your surroundings. And if you see a moose, then you know, like in your neighborhood, they're aggressive, just stop and warn the person walking, give them a heads up. That goes a long way. And finally, one of the things I wanted to really discuss tonight is in the laydown, there is a item here. It's called Operation Children First. If you're not familiar with Operation Children First, it states, and I'm going to read from their website, Operation Children First was started by Kenai local Matt Brown. He was recognized by the Soldotna Chamber of Commerce last year for the Volunteer of the Year award. His goal was to give back to the community, especially our kids. So he started a nonprofit more than 5 years ago. This project has helped over 1,500 local Kenai Peninsula families. He likes a knack with helping cover many gaps left by other programs and simply making things happen. He started this program, it was called Kenai Kids Need Christmas, which many of you seen has eventually branched out, and it's provided alternative means of support. So a lot of what Mr. Brown does is he does backpacks and school supplies. He does Thanksgiving meals, over 100 families this year. And then he does bikes. So he takes bikes from you if you've got bikes that have outgrown, or if you want to donate a new bike, and he gives them to kids, encouraging them to get out and be active and involved. He's also doing snow machine races. He does clothing drives. And I've had the pleasure of watching Matt grow this program and got to support it since the beginning. And now we're at this point where it's grown so much that they have their first ever event. So they are doing a dinner fundraiser that will have a silent auction, and it will be Saturday, February 18th at 6 o'clock. And in your laydown packet, you can get the tickets for the event at the bottom. They are looking for donations. It's going to be over here at the Kenai Catering has donated their space, and Main Street Bar has donated the bar for the event. So I encourage you to get out and support this. And again, if you're not familiar, reach out to Mr. Brown. I think a lot of us are familiar with Matt and what he's doing in Operation Children First. I can say in our neighborhood watch page, we decided last year we were going to sponsor families that could not get on through Salvation Army or Love Inc. because they missed the deadlines. And so we ended up taking on one family of 5. Then we took on another family of 7. Then we took on another family of 4. Next thing you know, we went from a neighborhood trying to help one family to a neighborhood trying to help 5 families. So what we did is we bought all the food, all the basic needs. We had moms that had taken on nieces or nephews, and they didn't have diapers for the month. And then she didn't have laundry detergent. So we provided all of those things for this mother and for all the families. Well, Matt found out what was going on and invited us over to his house. And if you've ever been there for his program, you walk into his house there in Inlet Woods, every bit of his house is just covered in donations. And he's got them separated, and he said, go through and pick out whatever those kids need. And so he was able to then provide the Christmas toys to those families. And so our neighborhood started off of just the basic necessities, and partnering with Matt, we were able to give full Christmases to multiple families. And that's just what Matt does. He opens up, he gives back to the community and the people within it. And I can't recognize him enough in everything, but I really wanted to bring attention to this, speak to him, and maybe encourage you, Mr. Mayor, to consider doing a proclamation. I know you've coached Matt and you're familiar with Matt, but I would encourage us to acknowledge the fact that he's got this amazing nonprofit, operates it from Kenai. He's a Kenai guy, and he's definitely very valued in our community. That's all I have.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Basin.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I could also say a lot of good things about Matt and his charity. Great work. I agree 100% with those comments. On another similar issue, this last night, Kenai Central High School basketball game put on a great fundraiser. We have a young man, Zach Armstrong, who's battling leukemia. The community came together last night. It was amazing to watch, playing Nikiski, all the sports teams, Soldotna. There was so much support from the community. I'm sure I'm missing some, but they raised over $40,000 for the family last night. Pretty neat whenever we have families in need and you see the community come together. I applaud them for that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Councilman Exton.
Can't top that. I don't have any comments.
Thank you. We have no executive session or pending adjournment or pending items. Seeing no other business for this body, excuse me, we are adjourned.